Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Luke Schafer.
Marcelo, Rouco.
And I'm Ralph, and we are finally back to do the Order of the Green Lady. It took us a long time to span the globe with our crazy time zones. I think we got some great voices here, and we are excited to bring the Green Lady Army review to you. So normally this is the part where we share your history and your origin stories, but you guys were just on List Builders not too long ago. So we're going to dive right in. I'll throw it over to Luke. What is the elevator pitch for playing this army?
I think that depends about whether you're coming into this sort of more from a lore perspective or a battle perspective. The lore perspective is, do you like the more nature aspect of the Arthurian legends, or do you like, Bretonnian from fantasy and want to use lots of knights and mix in some nature stuff? From a play perspective, it's pretty much always, do you want to hit hard with cavalry really quickly and project a lot of threat across the board really far. And maybe sometimes also, do you want a tanky water boy list with some water elementals?
In my case, my elevator pitch would be that this is an army that you can tailor to your style, whether you like a combined arm list that has, a hammer and anvil style, some shooting, some magic, some punching, or whether you want to focus on movement and combat. You can create a list that suits your style.
We'll touch on this in the background, but the interesting thing is obviously the way they did port over Bretonnia into the game, and then made a conscious effort to kill Bretonnia, but yet the survivors of that, either ended up in Basileia and became the Brother Mark, or the vagabonds that ended up in Forest of the Galahir, and became Order of the Green Lady. I think it's really interesting to see the evolution of this army. And in fact, out of all the armies, this one has the most interesting character arc.
Yeah, that's the one. If you like those types of units or the play style of, back in the day with Britannia, then one of those two orders is a good fit, but they've got their own unique flavor and style that I think really sets them apart and makes them interesting rather than just a direct port of Britannia.
So we'll start with a couple questions here from the community. The first one's Jesse Garrity says, how do you not get bored playing Green Lady? And I assume he's talking about this Alpha Strike, lots of Forsaken.
I don't know, Jesse, do you get bored of winning?
It's not just about winning. I've tried every single unit in this army list. I've played every style. I've played a lot of Heart Piercers. I've played Water Elementals. I played Alpha Strike. I played many different styles. I've enjoyed the variety that it has. I think when most people think about Order of the Green Lady, they only see the Alpha Strike, but it's got a lot of different styles you can play with it. And I tried them all, so I found it very exciting and stimulating to be able to see all the different styles to then later on arrive at whatever suited me best.
Paul has a similar question about it being a boring list. The second part of his question, I think, is I would love to get your guys' take on it, which is what can be done to attract more interesting followers?
As in players, he means? What do you think he means by followers?
I believe that's right. How can it attract more players?
Yeah, I think, look, both of these questions, if people think it's a boring list, they got 27 other choices, right? They don't have to be playing this one. So if you don't like it, go and play something else. Let us enjoy it.
Like the bricks.
Exactly. Go play whatever you find exciting and let us enjoy this.
I think the problem is, though, there is a clear winner in terms of playstyle for Order of the Green Lady, in terms of overall power of the list that you can build. And then there's some ancillaries to that we can talk through as we go through the list, that sort of, are similar in some ways, but at its core does project long melee threat. While, as Marcelo has said and he's had a lot of success with different types of builds in Green Lady, people don't tend to come to the army with those builds in mind because those kinds of builds can be done as good or better in some other factions. I think really you've got to want to either play that, start from that foundation of this is I want to play the list that Green Lady is really good at, or I really love the flavor of this army probably to come into it in the first place. And I think it's kind of like Brother Mark in that it's just very niche in terms of its flavor and appeal. So your flavor players, you're not bringing in a broad base, and also people that want to play, don't want to play Alpha Strike tend to shy away from Green Lady and Brother Mark as well.
What's the main difference between Order of the Green Lady and Brother Mark?
I played Brother Mark for about 2.5 years before I came to the Green Lady. I am an old Warhammer Fantasy Bretonnian player, and in the old world right now, I play Bretonnia again, so I'm all for the good knights. And I would say that in the case of Brother Mark, it's something that you can play a more hammer and anvil type list. You have good, defense 5, hordes of infantry. You have good cavalry, but not as good as Order of the Green Lady. You've got an in-between cavalry that, is better than the regular knights, but not quite as good as the Redemption Knights. And but you have a lot of peasant synergies. I used to love running peasant armies with Brother Mark. So you can run a different flavor. While Order of the Green Lady has better shooting than Brother Mark. Heart piercers are far better than the bowman, than the human bowman. You can play with a lot of different elementals that bring, either defense 6 if you want it, or, the whole regen of water elementals. And you have flying knights, which is, a key strength of the Order of the Green Lady army. I could see in a 4th edition bringing them together, where perhaps with different generals it goes into different builds. I think that I would love to see the Order of the Hunt from Brother Mark to be mixed in amongst the Order of the Green Lady units, and to be able to have a knight army that you can put together to your flavor and style.
Yeah, Brother Mark's that more typical human-centric combined arms army, whereas Green Lady has a lot of different options to go down different routes of different kinds of monsters and monsters, large infantry and those sorts of things. And of course, the flying cav, everyone loves them.
Let's jump into modeling. My favorite double hyphenated man of the hour, John Paul Fuller Jackson. Should Mantic make models for this army?
I would love to see it. I think they've done a pretty good job with the new knights that come out that can now be used for Brother Mark. But I think that things like Redemption Knights, when you look at the lore of Redemption Knights, is this whole, water elemental armor that chooses their wearers. And I think that's something that's very unique to the background. We were talking about how we differentiate from the old Britannia and from just regular knights. I think that Mantic can really do something with that mix of water elemental, nature, and human knight.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting modeling opportunities if this is a strong enough army for them to persist into future editions as its own thing. But that water elemental armor sounds awesome, but also just the regular knights with a more of a Green Knight style theme rather than the traditional heraldic theme that most sort of these knight armies and models come with. I think it's got a really unique flavor to it, and I'd love to see models come out for them.
John Paul even brings up that you could have antlers and cloaks that are made of vines and leaves, and so it's almost like a wood elfy cavalry army, right? Yeah, so yeah, and obviously the water elemental element of the list is unique. Lady of the Lake and the redeeming qualities of water. I mean, it's a little on the nose, but I think it's pretty awesome. Mo asks, with the rumors of forthcoming a lot of theme lists, how would you make the case for Green Lady surviving as a standalone Mantic army, thematically separate from Bretonnia? I mean, I'll start by saying I think they've done a good job of it's not Bretonian anymore. I think they really have pushed it away. The Bretonnian army doesn't have water elementals and centaurs. But what are your thoughts on how you would make the case that it is not the same as Bretonian?
I think Brother Mark is a lot closer to the Bretonian army than Order of the Green Lady. So I would like to either see the two join together, or if one has to be cut, then it should be Brother Mark, because it's closer to the traditional Bretonian list as opposed to Order of the Green Lady, which has a lot more Mantic flavor and more unique IP.
Tom Annis also says, how much of your own money would you be willing to bet the army will survive in 4th edition? So, this is a question that we come back to a lot with these smaller sub-faction armies lately is will they survive to fourth? There's a lot of speculation. I don't think none of us know any idea about what they're going for with fourth in terms of the lists, but I and plenty of others feel like a good approach would be something like, fewer core armies with maybe a special character that unlocks certain units to add to that unit and hide some others and sort of go down that actual sub-list route. Maybe Brother Mark is a sub-faction of Basileia and Lady Rose is a sub-faction of Kingdoms of Men, for example. That sort of approach, if they take that, then I think it'll survive because it's got this cool, unique lore and flavor that you don't see anywhere else in the Mantic lore. So fingers crossed. But if they're staying as full standalone factions, I don't think it'll survive.
The way nature's presented in Panethor is a lot different than in the old world. It's very swingy. Sometimes it's going to crush crush the good and the bad because its goal is to maintain balance. In terms of theme armies, this is one that has enough unique flavor to warrant sticking it out. And again, I still think in terms of all of the armies that have really were direct corollaries to Warhammer in the old world, I think they did the best job of really killing off that legacy. As soon as those towers fell into the abyss, that was like, good night. And I know it upset a lot of people, but I thought that took a hell of a lot of balls to go ahead and do that. And then to pick up the pieces and rebuild that in a unique way. So there's just enough there to make you feel the heartstrings of Bretonnia, but like it's its own thing. What is your motivation for playing the army?
Well, I start with the background. I only ever play good armies or neutral armies. I have never planned to play an evil army. And I've always, just like I came from Bretonnia in previous years before I came into Kings of War, I love knights. I love the chivalrous knight that takes, that protects and that does the right thing. And I feel like even though in the case of Order Green Lady, it's a neutral faction, if you go into the lore, it's forces of nature that's neutral, and the Order of the Green Lady Knights are actually the good within the neutral. And if you go into that story in the lore, when forces of nature feels that it needs to go against forces of good to restore balance, it leaves the good knights at home. They don't take them with them to fight against the good to restore balance. So even though they're neutral, they're still the good guys within the forces of nature.
For me, it was actually kind of more a modeling choice. I bought way too many boxes of the new Ravens for Northern Alliance, and I started down this path of kit bashing and modeling to have an army that can be used as a number of factions. Obviously, we've got Northern Alliance. They're also usable as Varangar. And then I thought, well, Kingdoms of Men doesn't really have any specific models other than some Basilean stuff you could use. So I started building, using pack hunters and tribesmen and the ravens with Frostfang cavalry riders on them as their flying beast cav. And from there, I was like, well, this army can actually be loads of different armies. So then I thought, it could be Green Lady as well if I have some water elementals, which are on the Volsung principle now. So it actually came through this modeling aspect of Northern Alliance and Kingdoms of Men, and then into Green Lady, because as we know, they don't make models for Green Lady, so you've got to get those models from somewhere. And I thought, well, why not make an all Mantic Green Lady army by kit bashing and repurposing models from other factions into Green Lady? So mine is Order of the White Lady because they are snow themed, but yeah, there's pretty well represented models that I've got for this army.
That's a great idea, Luke.
Roger had a question that I think, Marcelo, you've already answered. Why did going into the forest turn their alignment from good to neutral? They are technically neutral, but they're not really. They're just sort of bending their knee a little bit to the Green Lady herself. But they are still good.
Yes.
So, and then we do have another question from Rick Brooks. He says, what direction would you like the lore to go towards to continue the separation of its Bretonnian origins? So let's start there. I mean, do you think we need to keep going down this path? Is there additional things that you would change to the lore to further separate this, medieval French chivalry versus what we've got now in the Order of the Green Lady?
I like the fact that we have the good knights within the neutral faction of nature, in Order of the Green Lady. And I feel that they are not longer that Bretonnian heritage. It's not peasants, okay? They're just, knights trying to do the right thing, blending in with nature, and that's sufficient flavor and that it doesn't need to go any further than that to separate from its origins.
I just like that the Green Lady is the Mantic version of the Lady of the Lake, but the Green Lady is the one that actually has the water elementals. The Lady of the Lake doesn't.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to remember that where the Brotherhood came from, right? The Brotherhood were the Watchers, even back to the very first Uncharted Empires back in 2015. I mean, they were they were out there, fighting the Varangur, fighting the Abyss, all the sources of Korgan. And, even though they have split up and they've become two factions, they're still doing that thing. The Watch is eternal and they're still on it. They're just in different places now, and they're not necessarily sitting around the rift, right? They're out and about. For me, I think once they destroyed the Brotherhood and the Remnant started, I kind of forgot about them being a Bretonnian corollary, because there's so many other units that are not traditional knights in the army. I mean, in the Bretonnian list, it's Peg Knights, it's Knights, Trebuchet, right? Yeah, there's foot guard, like you would find in maybe some other armies like peasants and stuff, or the Grail Reliquary and that kind of thing. But like in my mind, like water elementals and centaurs and some of the elements you can get in from the nature side, you have the option. And I know you guys are going to say that's probably not the best option, but there's an option there, right? Like you can play it, even if it's maybe not the most efficient thing on the table. So I'm excited to see where they do take it, though. I think there is opportunity for it to continue growth, because I think it's almost like this is our version of chaos, in the sense that you never really know what the Green Lady's going to do, So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, maybe Green Lady, Order of the Green Lady, will get disillusioned and they'll break off and maybe they take their quest somewhere else. Who knows?
But from a mechanics perspective, I think there's more they can do to integrate, that whole lore of water elementals and knights to work better together. At the moment, they're there, but they're kind of separate things, and it'd be great to see them to be more synergistic with the nature elements.
100%. And I think you hit on the head, though, that whole water elemental, which has been part of the Brotherhood army forever, like that is just a cool thing. I just, I'm a big fan.
Well, that sounds like a nice segue into the Army Special Rule.
It's almost like you podcast from time to time, Luke. You know what we'll do? We'll take a quick commercial break, and on the other side, we will get into the Army list. We'll be right back.
I'm Tyler Schultz, loser at Vanguard, but countercharger in Kings of War, and you're listening to Countercharge.
Welcome back to Countercharge, and next we're going to jump into the Army itself. We're going to start with the Army Special Upgrade, Vial of Sacred Water. Guys, I'll just start there. Where do you rank the special rule? In the pantheon of special rules, where do you put it?
It's something that you can take it or leave it. I am using it at the moment in my latest list. As in, I have a few points left and it's a nice to have, but it's not something that makes or breaks the game. It's not something you have to have. It's nice that it's there, but I think that in the next iteration, I would love to see something better and more synergistic.
Looking at it surface level, it's a very average upgrade that you might spend some extra points on. However, for me, the real key is that synergy with gaining the keyword of Sacred Water, because the Greater Water Elementals, Radiance of Life, now affects anyone with a Vial of Sacred Water. The Devoted, if you've got them, same thing. The Champion of the Green Lady that I've played a few times has the Rallying for Sacred Water as well. So for me, it's really about getting Sacred Water keyword onto as many units as possible so that all of my supporting units now affect those units. And that's what really brings the list together for me. So I run Water Elementals and Forsaken, and sometimes Knights, and everyone's got Sacred Water. So all of those auras and effects affect everyone.
So once the water is drunk from the vial, is it still into play?
Yes.
It's the vial, not the water, that's sacred.
Apparently. Well, no, but now the Sacred Water's in them. So
fair point. Fair point.
Still get that. There's still Sacred Water in the general area. But yeah, so like you can basically play a list where everyone has Sacred Water as a keyword, and it's reasonable combined arms to a degree list as well, not so much shooting, and get those synergies.
And let's give them the rules of Vial of Sacred Water. This unit gains the keyword Sacred Water. In addition, once per game, when given an order, this unit may remove D2 points of damage previously suffered. The unit's Vial of Sacred Water is then depleted, and cannot be used again for the remainder of the game, though the unit retains the Sacred Water keyword. See, Luke does read the rules. He knows them very, very well. And I guess they also have a special upgrade called Deny the Demon. The Brotherhood, Order of the Green Lady armies cannot ally with the following armies: Abyssal Dwarves, Forces of the Abyss. It doesn't matter anymore. Nobody plays with allies, so I guess that's a bygone thing. Steve Hildrew does ask, Green Lady should be a theme list of forces of nature, unlocked by a specific knight hero. What do you guys think?
I think that can work if that's the way they go down in 4th edition. That can work.
Yeah, just make it Champion of the Green Lady unlocks the Green Lady units, or even maybe the Avatar could have that option for what she unlocks.
We have a question from Alexi. Do you recommend bringing Sacred Water vials, even if you are not running one of the many Radiance of Life auras that run off of it?
I do. I actually have it in my army list. I have it on my Exemplar Redeemer, and I have it on some of my other redemption. It's not the redemptions, Forsaken. So I keep it on the Forsaken because sometimes they're out of heal range and they start taking damage. And to be able to heal 1 or 2 wounds can mean the difference between them sticking around and not sticking around.
And there's lots of chip heal in the army as well, but Radiance of Life from Avatar, even if you're not playing Devoted. And then you've got if you're playing Command Dice, you've got the heal 1 hit point there. And if you're running a Druid as one of your Inspirers, then you've got potentially a little bit of heal there, but not a lot on the Druid. So it's good to add that extra, pip or 2 of heal, combined with the other little bits of chip healing that you've got in the list to sort of sustain through more of the game.
And let's just quickly talk about Command Dice. And I know nobody's running them right now, but you do have By the Master's Will, which allows you to turn off Shambling, and you have Unshakable Will, which gives you Regeneration 5+ special rule, which seems to be pretty good on Forsaken Knights. Maybe I'm wrong, but Luke, I know you've used them in the past at one point, right? So, what are your thoughts on your faction orders?
Most tournaments in Australia, as far as I can tell, are using them. All of the tournaments we've had in Queensland so far this year have used them, and Clash of Kings tournament run by Matt down in Canberra used them as well. So, and that was we did that prior to the change to 3 red dice as well. So I did take an extra couple of red there, and the orders were very key for me to get my wins down there. The Shambling turn off, it's fine if you really need it. Sometimes it's useful. Usually it's not. You could leave that at home and not cry about it. Unshakable Will, getting regen on Forsaken Horde occasionally is very, very nice. You regen them back, and then you Radiance of Life with Avatar, and then maybe a heal from the Avatar or a Druid or something, and they're back to full, no problem. Especially if they've got a Vial of Sacred Water. So that's a really good one to use on Forsaken Hordes. Or if you're running infantry hordes of any kind that don't have, if they're not ensnarers, then that's a really good one there. But for Green Lady, similar, I guess, to a lot of other armies, it's the common commands that really become very valuable. Being able to back up or sidestep 10 inches with a Forsaken Horde is extremely good. That's potentially game-winning moves on that one. And, the extra heal, the rerolls when you need them, that's sort of where you want to put most of your dice, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had lots of discussion on this. There's some armies that have better faction orders than others. These aren't terrible faction orders, right? I think they have their use. The By Master's Will is probably situational. Unshakable Will, getting a Regen 5+ is never going to be a bad thing. And in some essence, it sort of ties into the theme of the army, right? With the regeneration, the nature of the water, right? The regenning power of the sacred vials and stuff. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 4th edition. Well, with all of that preamble out of the way, we're going to get into the army list proper. We're going to start with the infantry, and we're going to start with Naiad Ensnarers, which come in Troop Regiment and Horde, 1, 3, 4 unit strength, 10, 12, 25 attacks, 9, 11, 13, 15, and 20, 22 nerve. And they did have a points adjustments with Clash of Kings 2025. It's now 80 points for the troop, 125 for the regiment, and 210 for the Horde. And if I'm reading this right, guys, they're a regular in the Green Army list. That's correct?
Correct.
What your guys' thoughts on Naiad and Snares? I can honestly say I've never seen a Green Lady player have them, but maybe I'm not paying attention.
I've used them. I've used a horde of them with the Hammer of Measure Force as to see what it would look like as an envol that can go into terrain and combine the Ensnare with the difficult terrain, and they're okay. They're not. They cost about the same as another hammer, so it's a question of, do I want something that I can plunk in the middle and get people to soak up, get it to soak up damage and soak up a charge, or do I want another hammer? So that's kind of the choice. And I've tried it for a few games, did okay, but then I took them out of the list.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to play them is a horde with hammer generally, if you can. It is kind of a nice thing with the amount of heal you've got to be able to regen and then heal back and be at full every turn unless they're dead, which is why horde would really be the only way that I would play them. But I think I would be playing other things at that price point. Like Marcelo said, you're looking at a hammer now, whereas there's other horde units that you can kind of get for a fair bit cheaper.
Scott Henderson has a couple questions tied to this style unit. Specifically, he's asking, how do you play the defense 3 units to make them viable, right? Because I think his concern is that defense 3, are easily taken off. But you just mentioned that they do have regen and you have other sources of heal and stuff in the list. So maybe just touch on, it's not just Naiad and Snares. There's other things that are defense 3, but just in an army that feels like it's high defense and very like Alpha Strike going to run you down or through you, you've got these other style units.
Sure. I mean, I use Heart Piercers as well with the same kind of defense. And it's something that you have to put on terrain because defense 3 is just too easy to, shoot down, magic, and then come and finish off with just a single unit after it's taken enough wounds. Even though 4+ regen sounds great, and on average you should be, getting back at least half your wounds, often it doesn't happen. The dice don't always cooperate, and the universe doesn't always give you average dice, and it's just too easy to lose them. So like Luke mentioned before, yes, they work okay, but there is just better options.
Yeah, defense 3 units, particularly shooting ones that we'll get to soon, but they really like being in lists where you can get Veil of Shadows or something like that. I think in this army, you're tending not to take Veil of Shadows because the core mainstay of the army doesn't need it. You've got the heal if they do chip wounds, so I don't think it tends to be a spell that you would take in Green Lady, but defense 3 units really do want Veil of Shadows and to be in terrain.
And I think what you're saying is there are viable ways to use them. That might not be your first call, right? That might not be the first thing you go to, but if you want to paint some Naiads or some Heart Piercers, there's ways to make them work. All right, next up, we've got the Men-at-Arms Retainers. You know what, Marcelo, you're going to surprise me here and say you use these guys a lot.
I do. They score me all the points. They score me all the objectives. I always take 2 regiments, and they're the guys that sit on the back line, that go and sit on objectives, pick up tokens. I think they're a must-have because we're in an objective base game, and the hammers are either off to either get stuck into combat, you lose them, but these guys are sitting at the back winning you the game. So I think they're essential.
Yeah, I haven't played the Retainers in Green Lady, but I have played Shield Wall in Kingdoms of Men, and
you stole my thunder. That's exactly what I was going to say. For 5 more points, you've got Headstrong, right? I'm like,
yeah, but they can't take Indomitable Will, so swings and roundabouts. But they don't really fit the lists that I've been building so far in Green Lady, but they're definitely a good unit, particularly in regiments. I think there is a case for a horde just because 175 points for that nerve at defense 4 is pretty good with Headstrong as well. And they can get the Vial of Sacred Water, which means they can get all of the auras and whatnot that the list can get, and including if you're playing Champion of the Green Lady, his rallying. So I think there is a case for the hordes as well. Leave the troops at home, maybe. For 10 more points, you can get a Pegasus. Yeah, regiment's great. Horde, maybe, depending upon your list.
Yeah, and they come in troop, regiment, and horde, and I think the key there is the regiment's 3 unit strength. It's nice to have some slower, sturdier unit strength that maybe are kind of slogging behind or can stick behind to stay back there and hold those objectives. And then 105 points. Go ahead.
Yeah, and for 5 points less than the Horde, though, there is an infantry regiment that you might be more interested in that we'll get to later. So this Horde does obviously have a bit more nerve, but at defense 4,
And so the next up, we've got Order of the Brotherhood on foot. It is a troop or a regiment, 1 and 3 unit strength, 10, 12 attacks, 11, 13, 15, 17 nerve, 95 and 145 points. It also has headstrong, so it's kind of a similar version, but the difference between this and the retainers is that it's defense 5 and it's melee 3+ as to melee 4 and defense 4. They're both speed 5, and you have the same ability to exchange for double-handed weapons. Basically, is this a unit? I'm going to guess you guys wouldn't take this, right? If you want infantry that's just cheap and sits back, you take retainers, and if you want something that's a little bit more offensive, you might take this next unit that we're going to talk about. But maybe I'm wrong.
Correct.
Yeah. So next we've got Order of the Thorn, and that's what Luke was alluding to just a minute ago. This is a unit that comes as a troop and a regiment at 1 and 3 unit strength, 12 and 15 attacks, 11, 13, 15, 17 nerve, and it's 110 points for the troop and 170 for the regiment. It's speed 5, melee 3, defense 5, but it is headstrong and phalanx, which, it's kind of counterintuitive to me because, you're a cavalry army, but so I guess cavalry armies are typically going to want to, I don't know. It's it's the last thing your own army wants to see, so why not bring it? And again, they have the ability to take Vial of the Sacred Water for 5 points, and I think Brian Luttrell asks here, why is the sheer efficiency of Order of the Thorn overlooked? So first of all, is it overlooked? And if it is, why?
Well, I think it is by sort of a lot of people. I've got a couple of lists with some of them in. It's hard, depending upon your playstyle, to fit them in some lists. But they are extremely efficient. They're bulwarkers. So, because headstrong, phalanx, 15 attacks. They're bulwarkers from the formation,
right?
Because these ones hit on 3s. Their point, they can't take throwing dogs. So what? They can take a pip of extra heal, and again, a phalanx unit at 15, 17, defense 5 that's getting Radiance of Life, potentially their own Vial of Sacred Water, some heals thrown. They're going to stick around forever. They are as survivable as a large infantry horde. They hit almost as many attacks as a large infantry horde, obviously just without any crush. So getting a Bane Chant on them or something as well, they're suddenly hitting quite effectively. You get them off a hill, particularly into a cheeky flank because they're an infantry regiment, so they're quite a small footprint. Bane Chant, Thunderous Charge off a hill. That's a lot of wounds.
Yeah, and I should mention, in Clash of Kings, they actually got cheaper. I forgot to mention.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
the
troop went to 100 points, so that's a 10-point drop, and the regiment went down by 15. At 155.
Yeah, that's right.
And, at 170, maybe that's where Brian's coming from. At 170, maybe it is overlooked. But 155, I don't see why you would ever take Order of the Brotherhood on foot, right? For 10 points more, exactly. You're just getting – and phalanx is worth at least 10 points.
Absolutely. And I have used, I have had a unit of these in my list in the past. It's not in the current list, but I really like them. But then I ended up swapping them for 2 units of men-at-arms retainers, because the ideal use for that phalanx is the way that you use the Pegasus, which is to go forward and pin down other units before your hammers come and countercharge. But then if you're using it by pushing it forward to be the trap that enemy hammers get stuck in, then you don't have somebody at the back capturing the objectives, the table quarters, the zones. So I ended up, as much as I love them, I ended up swapping them over for 2 men-at-arms that just focused on the job of winning the games while the rest of the units were out fighting.
See, I use my pegs to capture objectives late in the game. I protect them like quarterbacks. They're what wins me games most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, next let's jump into the ranged infantry, and it is Naiad Heart Piercers. And I think you guys kind of already covered them. If you're going to use them, they're defense 3, right? But they do have the regen, and you do have some other abilities to keep them standing, but probably need to put them in cover. We'll go right to Nick's question. He says, are Naiad Heart Piercers worth it? I've never really gotten them to work with the army with the 18-inch range, and everything else is outpacing them. So maybe expand on what you guys talked about. You were putting them in the woods, but in relation to the cavalry wings of your army, how are they staying behind? How are you making them work in synergy with the other elements of your army?
I used to run 3 regiments of heart piercers when I first started playing around with Order of the Green Lady, and the concept was that they could, similar to what the men at arm retainers are doing for me now, they would go and sit on an objective, but still add something to the fight, by being able to have some shooting. But I think the problem is not so much a defense 3. The problem is the 18-inch range shooting, because you go first, you can do a thing, 5-inch movement, 18, you're not going to be able to hit the enemy lines with your shooting on your first round. And they're pretty expensive. They're very high in points for something that's not going to be able to contribute for maybe a third of the game. So I ended up removing them. I'm fine with Defense 3. If they had 24-inch range, they'd be worth the points that they cost today.
Yeah, they're a great unit in other lists for me. Exactly what Marcelo said. The 18-inch range is the problem here. I don't like 18-inch range on shooting units that aren't scout, as a general rule. It's fine though if you have enough weight of ranged. So, what do you want to use range shooting for, right? You're either going heavily into shooting so you can try and take units off in a turn, or you're doing enough shooting to apply pressure at range to force the opponent to move in, like either keep backing away or come into you before they would have otherwise wanted to. But you've got the speed in other units to force them to do those things anyway, so they're not filling that role really in this army. So I think, the 18-inch range is a bit too limiting for me. I think if you're going a much more combined arm, if you're going lots of infantry and heart piercers, then maybe like 1 or 2 Forsaken or Knights as a sort of a fast mobile hammer, but you're sort of more going an infantry style build. My first question is why you're playing Green Lady, and the second point though is that in that case, I think heart piercers can sort of fill a role in the army.
And we do have another question from Alexi who says, should there be more ranged options? And I'm in Order of the Green Lady, and I guess I'm wondering if they did give you more options. They're probably, and if they were 24 inches, they're not going to hit on 4s, right? Like they're not going to give you elves. Well, I mean, maybe you guys take the question here. First of all, do you think we need more options in terms of ranged units? And if so, what would you want?
Well, there is another ranged unit. There's the Centaur Hunters, which are a fine unit, but they're just bad Scorch Wings. I think they're a little bit overpriced for what they are, and again, they're defense 3 and very, very squishy. So, I think if the Unicorn was still cheap enough to be viable with Lightning Bolt, then there would be a build in there somewhere with some Heart Piercers, maybe some Bray Hunters, and a Unicorn or 2, and that gives a fair bit of range threat. But again, other armies do that kind of build better.
In terms of Centaur Bray Hunters, which are coming up next, I mean, Bryce and Alan did a pretty good job when we did the Forces of Nature. Doing what you just said is they are discount Scorch Wings in some way, but that's not something you really need in this list. They're also only 18-inch range, so that doesn't help Marcelo, who wants 24-inch range. So yeah, they're faster. Well,
I mean, the Bray Hunters, they're speed 8, nimble, and get Thunderous Charge with Pathfinder. So, they are good flankers. They are, but again, they discount Scorch Rings, but not a huge discount. So it's you just find yourself wishing for Scorch Rings.
Well, and also you can't get a horde of those guys, right? So whereas with the Scorch Rings you can. I mean, the best you can do is a regiment with with 14 attacks, which is the same as a Scorch Wing horde, and they do hit on 4s, but they're 180 points. So and they are only defense 3. Which we talked a little bit about defense 3. It can be a problem, and these guys don't have regen. It's time to get to the reason why you play this army is cavalry, or so I have been told. And so let's jump into this with the very first unit, which is the Order of Redemption, which is an irregular unit, and it's your classic knight. It's speed 8, it hits on 3s, it's defense 5, comes in a troop and a regiment, no hordes in this version. Maybe because it would be OP if it was, and 1 and 3 unit strength, 10 and 20 attacks. So it's even got a little more attacks than a normal regiment of knights. 12, 14, and 15, 17 nerve, 165 and 250. But it comes with my favorite. If you're going to have cavalry, the best is give me Crushing Strength 1 and Thunder Charge 1 as opposed to Thunder Charge 2. It just stays around a little longer. It's headstrong, inspiring, which is great, and it's regeneration 5+.
And it inspires.
I have been rolled over by Order of Redemption in Marcelo's army, so I know he plays them. Luke, why don't you start us off? These guys don't have wings, so you don't play them, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they are fantastic, and I think a lot of lists wish they had this unit. But for 5 more points, you're getting Forsaken. And well, how I play Forsaken, I always take the Vial. So for 10 more points, you're getting a Forsaken Horde, and the Speed 10 fly is a pretty enormous upgrade for a unit like this.
Interesting. I think that the best cavalry in the game. I mean,
For
something
sure.
with how many cavalry has 20 attacks? That inspires, that has regen. And I've played around with the combination, like Luke mentioned, between Forsaken and Redemption and what's the ideal scenario. I used to, in the initial experimentation with the list, I used to think more like Luke in that, take a flying. Why would you take somebody on the ground with less movement? But then I found that those extra attacks, those extra 4 attacks, especially when you're loading them up with something like Sharpness or Elite or Brew of Strength, that can make all the difference between breaking a unit and not breaking a unit. How many games have we all been in where we needed to do one more wound, or whether the nerve roll just missed by 1, right? So Redemption gives you that extra wound that Forsaken doesn't. And Redemption, because of the regen, has the sticking power. Right? While, Forsaken starts taking some wounds, and if you don't have some good healing around, you lose them. So I love them. I have 3 of them on my army list, and I load them up to the hill. One's got Sharpness, one's got Elite, and one's got Brewer Strength. Because these are the people that are going to do the damage.
Well said. And if you just do the thought experiment, I mean, the standard knight unit I was thinking about, it's just the knights that are in Kingdoms of Men, right? 190 points, has 4 less attacks, doesn't have Crushing 1, Thunder 1, it's got Thunder 2, doesn't have Headstrong. It doesn't have Inspiring. To be fair, though, it does have the ability to take Indomitable Will. It doesn't have Regeneration 5. So the question I would ask to anybody that's listening, for 60 points, do you want to switch one of the Thunder Charge to Crushing Strength 1, get Headstrong, Inspiring, and Regeneration 5, and have access to Sacred Water, which then opens up all those auras? I mean, and 4 more attacks, right? And more nerve, right? Because the Kingdoms of Men is only 14, 16. So this is a no-brainer. If you're going to take Knights without wings, this is the Knight unit to take.
And this is a thing that, when you think of the flavor of the army list and what makes it unique, if you go into the background, the Redemption Knights are, we're trying to do the right thing, but made bad decisions. They made bad choices. And they did things that they were not proud of. They did things that they were ashamed of. And the armor of Redemption, the water elemental armor, chases those peoples to help them prove themselves. And what makes them so elite is that they know they've done the wrong thing, and now they have to redeem themselves. And that gives them the impetus and energy to fight harder than anybody else so that they can be redeemed. And that's where the name comes from.
Yeah, and like I said, fantastic cavalry unit. Like you said, Marcelo, one of the best in the game. Just for me, it's very hard to take because of the way that I play the flyers. The extra 4 inches of speed on the charge and the fly means that you can kind of force people to have to worry about flanks a lot more than you would if they're facing Redemption. Redemption tend, I would guess, tend to hit people in the face. Would be my guess. Yeah. Whereas with the Forsaken, they often tend to hit people to the face because my opponents had to spend so much time covering all of those flanks that I otherwise would get.
But you can do both, right? Because you can have, like I do, one Forsaken on each flank, maybe by a flying Redeemer to go along with them, and the Redemption in the front. So you can have it all. You don't have to choose.
Well, in the next unit of knights that we want to talk about are kind of the vanilla versions, which are very similar to Kingdoms of Men. We've got Order of the Brotherhood, 8 speed, melee 3, defense 5, regiment and a horde, 3 and 4 unit strength, 16 and 32 attacks. Nothing new there. 15 and 17 and 12 and 22 and 24 nerves a little bit better, but 195 and 330 for the horde. But the difference is, they're still Thunder Charge 2, but they do have Headstrong, which, can, in the right circumstance, if you can roll that 3+, get you out of jail. And you do have the Vial of Sacred Water for 5+, and you have the ability to upgrade with the Banner of the Green Lady, and you get Pathfinder, right? And I guess you can only do one of your units with this, right? Because it's Green Lady 1. But 15 points for a regiment with Pathfinder. I mean, there's a lot of people that are crying the loss of the Pathfinder item, and you have one built in if you want. And then in addition, you could also take a regular magical artifact. So, Marcelo, you mentioned you might take 3 of the Order of Redemption. Any possibility that maybe one of them gets swapped out for Order of Brotherhood, save you a few points?
I have done it. So I used to run one of these units. Obviously you take it because you can have the Pathfinder, and you can add another magical item, and it's a good little unit. I think for the points that it can do quite well. So I have tried it. I like it. But then I went back to the Third Redemption.
Yeah, I've run a regiment of this before. I was running Water Elementals. Now I can't really fit it in. But yeah, with the Pathfinder sitting out on a flank, particularly because I was playing the Champion of the Green Lady as well, that gets the rallying up to 16, 18 on them. And Champion has Strider, so the two could sort of be out on a flank in terrain somewhere and be a big nuisance for someone. With the Water Elementals that I'm running now, there's no space for this unit, but particularly a regiment. I think one regiment is a very good option with the Banner of the Green Lady. We did have a question from Keith that says, are Green Lady the best faction to take a horde of knights in? And I would say no faction is the best faction to take a horde of knights in. Some people might have some other opinions. I've played against knight hordes plenty of times, and if your opponent knows how to not get wrecked by night hordes, they will not get wrecked by your night hordes. Your night hordes will be the ones getting wrecked. Being able to sort of disorder them to take off that Thunder 2, which is, sure, they've still got 32 attacks on 3s, but there's a whole lot less killing power when they don't get their Thunder.
They're too easy to pin down.
They're so wide.
And you're also answering Jose Vega's question, the whether you take hordes or multiple regiments. I think there's some advantages too. Just having more units, right, is a good thing, even if it may not be points efficient. There's an advantage to having multiple. You got to kill multiple units. You can take multiple objectives. Hordes of cavalry are in any army are difficult to work.
If you're playing the horde, it's tempting to say, oh, well, that's the unit that the Banner of the Green Lady goes on to get the Pathfinder. But no, they need Strider boots. They're so big that you just can't avoid the obstacles. So they actually probably don't want the Banner, or as well as they actually want Strider boots.
Well, we do have one more cavalry unit, which are the Brotherhood Centaurs. They're a trooper or regiment, 1-3 unit strength, 6 and 12 attacks, 11, 13, 14, 16 nerve, and 105 and 160. And they're speed 8, melee 3, defense 4, crushing strength 1, thunder charge 1 with Pathfinder. That is good. But I just look at these and go 160 points. You have, I think, more resilient options. But maybe I'm wrong. There may be a role. I'm sure I'm ready for Marcelo to scare me and just tell me why Brotherhood Centaurs are their bee's knees.
Well, I've tried them, and I do like the fact that they have Pathfinder, but they just have too few attacks for me. Because when you think that you need 2 regular cavalry units to make sure you can break something on the charge, if you have these Centaurs, you really need 3. Because 2 don't have enough attacks to guarantee that you're going to break another 15-17 regiment that's defense 5.
160, 12 attacks. It's just not enough.
If they had nimble.
Just have the cake and the ice cream, Marcelo, right? Have it all.
Well, if we can wish for things,
now's the time, right? I mean, 4th edition's out there in the ether, so for sure. Maybe if you will it, Ronnie will make it happen.
Well, there's a lot of things with 14 attacks that have nimble. Like Bradamark has the light cav that you can have with Thunder 2. You can upgrade a regiment of medium cav that Bradamark has that has 14 attacks, that has nimble, and they hit on threes.
Next up is Woodland Critters, which is a swarm unit. Have you ever taken this in this army?
No, I haven't.
Marcelo said he'd tried out every unit in the army, and I was thinking, even these? No.
I should have said almost.
The guys on the nature review made a case of maybe very situationally in forces of nature. There's no way I could even think about how this would work, because for the points, there's just so many other things you could take.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, let's get into large infantry, where I think there's some interesting options that maybe push the army away from the traditional alpha striking cavalry hammer army, right? So we've got earth elementals, which obviously, they're earth elementals. Nothing special here. Defense 6, right? Where I think it shines is in the water elementals. And, they're speed 7, they're 4+ melee, 5+ defense, and then they come as a regiment in a horde, 9 and 18 attacks. Dash 14 and dash 17, that's a good thing, right? Fearless is always more dependable. 130 and 220 points. But what I like about these guys is the crushing strength 1, the regeneration 5+, the shambling, which I can take or leave, but the strider, right? Like, it's water, so it flows over the walls with no problem. And it has the sacred water keyword and waterbound. I know, Luke, you're a fan.
Yeah, so the earth elementals, I could see a case for regiments if you're not playing the water synergies, but they're also very slow. So it doesn't make, maybe as a really hard to kill backfield objective holder, or to really push out in front. Maybe the hordes, though, just play water elementals. I think they're going to fit your army a lot better. The water elementals are 2 extra speed on top of the earth elementals. Sure, they don't have as much nerve or defense, but they get all the other synergies. They get the regen, they get the strider, which is better than Pathfinder. Pathfinder is just objectively worse than strider on shambling units, right? Because they can't double anyway. So it is all about the water elementals. I don't know why they even bothered with the earth elementals in this list. It's completely not necessary.
Fit the theme, in my mind.
Yeah, if you're taking them, you're not gaining enough to take them even in those situations over water elementals to bother. Like if they didn't exist, you would just take the water elementals for the same price, and you wouldn't think anything of it. So it doesn't make much sense to me. But water elementals are great. I've played one regiment in an otherwise alpha strike army, and it was fantastic. It could get onto objectives, or it could be a chaff piece like a thick chaff piece up the front. But like Forsaken win games, sure, but this regiment played a very pivotal role in actually scoring certain objectives at certain times and helping win the game. So even just one regiment, and you think it wouldn't fit, it absolutely fits. Right, in a Forsaken, I had one Knight regiment, a bunch of Forsaken hordes, Champion of the Green Lady, Avatar, that sort of stuff. And you'd look at this Speed 7 regiment of Water Elementals and go, that doesn't really fit. It absolutely does. Fantastic unit. My preferred way, and we'll get to this soon, is to play them in the formation. I think what you gain in the formation over just taking some Water Elemental units in the list regularly is so huge that I wouldn't want to play them any other way.
And we do have a question from Philip Jordan Cox. He says, water elementals seem core to the theme of the army. However, they seem in a weird spot. What tweaks might be good to give them a role in the army? Is it just that there are better options for all their roles? I mean, I think what we're going to say here is that put them in the formation, and then it all makes sense.
Exactly.
Right? So let's jump in and talk about the formation. But before we do that, we need to talk about the partners to water elementals in that formation. So we're going to do things a little out of order. We're going to talk about the greater water elemental, which is a monster, which I like. 50 square bases, the 50 millimeter square bases are nice. So this guy is speed 7, melee 4, defense 5. He's 1 unit strength, 9 attacks, 8-18 nerve, and 180 points. Crushing strength 2. Regeneration 4+, shambling, and strider. And I should mention, they did get some changes. You just get Radiance of Life now for free.
Yeah, you just get it, and it affects Naiads as well. So the list builder still gives you the option on them to purchase it as an upgrade, I think maybe in the formation. So don't buy it. You get it for free.
Well, do you guys want to touch a little bit on, do you use greater water elementals? And then we'll talk, and then we'll get to the formation in a minute. But I mean, what do you think of the greater water element? First of all, it's a super cool model. I do like that model. the giant wave with all the debris kind of in the waves. Yeah.
All the water elemental models are great. They got like the fish and the little octopi and that sort of stuff floating around in them. They're really cool models, and they're fun to paint as well. I mean, we've said it a few times. I like the formation, so I do like the greater water elemental because he gets all of those bonuses in the formation. I don't think for the price that I like, if I'm buying him out of the formation, I'm not sure that I would. I don't think you need a second one on top of the formation, really, but they're certainly not bad. But I wouldn't just run one, as the only sort of water stuff that I was running.
Well, let's jump in and talk about the Devoted, which is the other piece to the formation. The Devoted is a level 1 spellcaster, speed 5, melee 5, defense 4. Obviously he's an individual, so no unit strength, but he's got 1 attack, 11, 13 nerve, and 60 points. He's a spellcaster, so he does have some Channel of Sacred Water, right, which is while within 6 inches of our friendly core waterbound unit, the spellcaster adds 6 inches to the range of its Bane Chant, Heal, Icy Breath, and Surge spells. He also has Headstrong, and now it's a la carte, right? So now the points are actually 40 points, but now you have to pay for Heal 3. So it really comes out, if you're taking Heal, it ends up being the same points at 60. What about the Devoted, guys? Is that something that makes your list?
I used to play around with a Druid or a Devoted, so I had lists where I wanted a support caster, and I played with both, and I think they did a decent job, but eventually I got rid of all support casters. So now the Green Lady is the only magic caster that I have. So I feel like it's important. The game evolved for me, or the list evolved for me, to the point where it's more about the hammers and the chaff, and what do I need to make those two work better. And the support casters were not doing enough to support that. Hence, I ended up not having them in the list today, but I did play with them.
So the Devoted, he's a worse druid that can get Radiance of Life for Sacred Water. But if you're running a greater water elemental, then they have Radiance of Life. So and so does the Avatar of the Green Lady. So you don't really need that upgrade on the Devoted. So unless you're on the formation again, which we'll get to in a moment, I would say you almost always want the Druid, particularly because the Devoted doesn't have Inspiring. He has to buy it if he wants it, whereas the Druid gets that, so he can take Conjure Staff, because both of these casters have not many dice on their spells. So Conjure Staff is really, really useful if you're playing a spellcaster, to get that extra reroll, particularly on something like a Bane Chant, because they've only got Bane Chant 2, both of them. So if you're outside of the formation, the Devoted, it's a really hard sell to take, and they can't take command dice if you're playing with them either. So it's just a more expensive, like if you're taking the heal, slightly more expensive.
Devoted is really like a very cheap Green Lady, right? Because Radiance of Life, less healing, half the healing. But I think that if you're going to do that, you might as well either, like you said, go to a Druid or go to a Green Lady.
And the Channel of the Sacred Water is, I think, only a useful ability if you are playing a very, very heavy water list. If you're playing a list that's 50% or more water elementals, then it becomes useful. Otherwise, the Devoted is there with the water elementals anyway, probably casting spells on them. He doesn't need the extra range. It's not worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, Redemption Knights have Sacred Water as well. With that, they come innate with it, and so does the
heal. Yeah, that's fair. A bit more heal on that.
Anything with regen has the Sacred Water keyword.
You get it while you're within 6 inches of them. So the formation is called the Lurkers of the Lake. So it comes with 2 hordes of water elementals that cost an extra 5 points per horde. It comes with a greater water elemental for an extra 5 points, and a Devoted that costs an extra 25 points. The really key things are the upgrades, and this is what sets them apart significantly more than what the points add. So all units in the formation get Wild Charge 1 special rule, which is enormous. That makes them up to a 15-inch charge, and that is huge. And the Devoted gains Inspiring, gains Aura, Thunder Charge +1 for Waterbound only. So this is not Sacred Water in this case. This is Waterbound, so only your water elementals get this. But yeah, so Wild Charge 1 on all of the water elementals is insanely good. And the Inspiring, so now you can take a Conjure Staff. on the Devoted, and the Thunder 1 for the Waterbound as well. So now they sit there on 4s, but their Strider, Crush 1, Thunder 1. That's very good as well. So total formation extra points cost is 40 points, but well worth it if you're going to play those Water Elementals.
Alexi wants to know, is this auto include?
So I've topped 2 tournaments with Green Lady, and in one of them I didn't have it, and in one of them I did. So definitely not an auto include. But the resiliency that they give you, and just the one that I didn't have them, it was a flying Alpha Strike list. It was pretty typical, traditional. Not a lot of terrain mitigation as well, so I had to play really coy around that. These just plug a pretty big hole in the list, I think. So they did make the list better by putting them in.
Fantastic. Let's take a quick commercial break. On the other side, let's get into 1 Forsaken, 2 Forsaken, 3 Forsaken, 4 Forsaken. What everybody wants to hear. We'll be right back.
This is Trent Sosby, the best Forces in Nature player in the state of Colorado, and you are listening to Countercharge.
Welcome back to Countercharge. And next, let's get to Large Cavalry. Tom Annis starts us off with 5 hordes of Forsaken or more. And, Alexa says this is the case. You should always take Forsaken Cavalry over Redemption, Order, or Centaur Cav. If not, what reasons are there beyond just points?
So I think Forsaken have are an auto include. It's one of the strengths of the unit. But the question is whether you take, to me, I think you have Forsaken to threaten flanks. And when I look at the games that I occasionally lose with this list, it tends to be because I'm not surrounding my opponent. And what Forsaken do when you can have at least one horde on each flank is it makes your opponent worry about which way am I going to face. So I would say that you need a minimum of 2. I have played with 3 before. I have played with 3 Forsaken and 2 Redemption. I like the punching power of Redemption, but I still need, see the benefits of being able to threaten long range. So on one flank, I pair an Exemplar Redeemer with the extra distance, with the Brew of Haste, with a Forsaken. So those 2 really give headaches to my opponents. And then on the other side, to stop them from, facing my army and deny a corner, I have another Forsaken so that they can just face, 145-degree angle towards one corner of the board. And then they had a hitting units of Redemption towards the center, so that no matter which way they look, they're going to have something on the flank. So they must be there, whether you, I think you need to develop your own style of whether you have 2, 3, 4. Some people have 5, to the exception of everything else. I think that's a personal choice.
Yeah, I definitely think auto include. Like, why are you playing Green Lady if you're not playing Forsaken? But how many you take is the question. If you are playing an Alpha army, you're going to want as many as possible. The most I've run is 5. Adam Story, local guy, runs 6 in his, and 2 Beasts of Nature. So that's pretty gross. It only tends to be 11 or 12 drops in his armies, though, and that's kind of the problem, right? I've gone down to 4 now. So you've got the 1 Saken, 2 Saken, 3 Saken, 4 Saken. And I tried to drop to 3, but the joke didn't work. So we stayed up at 4. The thing I like about them and about having...
Do you have friends, look?
Yeah, not a lot. The thing about them, though, is when you can spread them out along your line and move them forward, like you said, there's nowhere that anyone can turn where they're not potentially giving up a flank. So it creates a lot of headaches for your opponent to have lots of these speed 10 flying units spread out across your entire line. So having them wide, having some in the middle, that's all good. And better generally to double charge with these to take something off in one go. But sometimes you can do the calculation and you go, well, if I can charge this into this unit, they probably won't kill me, but I probably won't kill them. They probably won't kill me on the clapback, but then I can heal up and go back in with the crush one still and finish them off, as long as I can protect them from flanks by charging things into the units to the sides of them. So sometimes you are making a choice to grind with the Forsaken, which they don't grind quite as well as the Redemption Knights because they don't have those extra 2 attacks, but they can grind in a pinch, particularly backed up with Bane Chant, because I've been typically running 2 Bane Chants in most lists that I run with these.
And we should mention the Order of the Forsaken comes as a regiment and a horde. 2 unit strength, 3 unit strength, 9 and 18 attacks, 12, 14, 15, 17 nerve, 155 and 255. That's 40 points more than a horde of Scorchwing. It's worth all 40 points. Speed 10, melee 3, defense 5+, crushing strength 1, thunder charge 1. That's what you need. Fly, headstrong, and you have options for the vile water. And I mean, they're just good, right? Flying Knights.
What Luke mentioned of being able to grind, you couldn't do that if you didn't have the crushing.
Yeah.
So the crushing is what makes this army able to grind.
When I think of Order of the Green Lady now, even though I would like to think that it's the water elemental piece that really ties it back to nature, it's these guys. And these guys have been around even in the Brotherhood army, the Peg Knights since the very beginning in 2015. So they're a beast of a unit, and the multiplier is pretty good the more you take, right? Like it just gives people no options at some point, right? Because you're just covering all the angles. So it's a difficult unit to play against, but I imagine it's not easy. It's not when the guys had you on the List Builder Studio, Marcelo, I mean, we talked about this, that you have to have patience with this army, right? And it's not just running it forward. It's about setting up for the kill shot, right? Either get them to be impatient by what Luke was talking about, either making them back up, which is then you are now asserting your dominance on them, or making them rush into you before they're actually ready. Maybe this would be a good time to just talk about how you operate multiples of these. And for context, Luke, are you typically taking like 3 or 4 of these? And Marcelo, are you more of a 2 horde kind of guy, or?
Yeah, I've got it down to 2 because I like the extra punchiness of the redemption. And what, Luke is absolutely right that what the Forsaken give you is the fact that no matter which way the enemy is facing, they're going to get a flank. But I feel that you can do that with just, 3 flyers. You can do that with 2 Forsaken, 1 on each side, while still having the extra punchiness. And when we're talking about grinding, to me, yes, Luke is right. The Forsaken can grind, but nowhere near as good as Redemption with, extra magical items to grind, with 4 more attacks with Region 5. So they're a must-have to me. For me, it's 2. I played around with more to 2, but it's a matter of style, right? Luke has a different style.
Yeah, I like 3 to 5. And the tip with these kinds of alpha armies is almost always, unless you really know what you're doing, whatever turn you think you're going in, don't go in that turn, go in next turn. Almost everyone goes in a turn too early. It's not about charging on turn 2. That's not how you generally win games with alpha armies. It's usually your turn 3 or 4 charge, setting up perfectly for that charge where you're just going to do maximum damage. What I do tend to find once you sort of get a better feel for it, though, is I'll often go in turn 2 on a flank somewhere, and then be a bit more coy on the other flank, because someone will, be a bit weaker on one flank, and I can go in, obliterate, and then turn down the line, and suddenly they've got a lot more problems, coming up the side. There was even a game where I double charged directly in the center of his line, and then managed to turn out with the units and come down his flanks and like both ways, and just just rolled the army up. So it's about picking the time and picking the place, and Pegasus can help with that we'll get to in a moment, because they can help cover flanks for a turn while you do that.
Well, let's get in and talk about monsters. We've got 3. We've already talked about the Greater Water Elemental in the context of the formation, but the 2 that we'll talk about now, first one is the Beast of Nature. I mean, real quick, guys, are you guys using Beast of Nature? It feels like for what they would use it for in either Herd or in Force of Nature, you have other units that could do that role. But talk to me. I mean, it's 160 points, so it seems kind of pricey, but I don't know. Are you guys using Beast of Nature?
So I when you say it's 160 point, I don't think that's correct, because if you are going to take a Beast of Nature, you're going to add extra attacks, you're going to add the flying, right? Because that's otherwise it's not worth it. And then you have the choice of, okay, I got an exemplar redeemer that's pretty much exact same points as a beast of nature. And okay, these flyers like to go in flanks, right? Like a big heavy hitting flyer doesn't want to go up the middle, okay, most of the time. And if you are going to go on the flanks, then you need inspiring. So I think it's a good unit. I have tested it. It hits harder than the exemplar redeemer. It's got a higher nerve, right? But I ended up leaving it for the exemplar redeemer so that it can pair up with a Forsaken and have inspiring in a flank of flyers.
Yeah, I don't, because I want more drops, so I defer to the pegs. Adam, that I mentioned, uses generally 2, I think. He plays quite low drop. He uses them very, very well. So, not always, I don't think, with the 7 attacks. That's if you've got the points, it's nice, but really they're about sort of nimble, getting in down flanks and behind units to sort of make people have to back units up or turn something they don't want to turn to face, so they don't so they can protect. Usually it's things like hopping over impassables and turning sideways to threaten where someone didn't think something would land. So that's kind of how you would use these. You pretty much never want to just push them up into something's front, although they can with the 15-17 nerve and defense 5. They can hold for several turns against a lot of things, just charging in the front if you really have to. But that's not the job they want to be doing. They want to be catching flanks or rears by being pains in the butt. So
next up, we got the Pegasus. Let me ask you guys: is this the best unit, really, for the points in this army?
I think it's the best draft in the game. The mobility you have with it, the ability to put it anywhere you want. The fact that because of the type of unit it is, that it doesn't even have to wound. Like, it's height 4, it's going to block line of sight. You can send it in. If you don't wound, you don't wound. Like, it still does its job, even if it doesn't create a single one.
Yeah, I've charged a Pegasus to the face of a dragon with a Bane Chant and a command dice to get a reroll to hit, because I'm like, I need to wound this thing, and you get that wound, and now the dragon's grounded. Arguably gargoyles are as good or better chaff for about that points, but certainly in this list, the Pegasus, there's nothing that even comes close for this number of points.
But gargoyles don't have the height, right? So
yeah, they don't have the height. They got the regen. They hit on 4s though with 10 attacks. Like, that's pretty. They catch a flank with gargoyles and things are potentially dying. And they have done so with my Abyss quite a few times. But the Pegasus, like the Pathfinder, there's been burnable tokens in terrain, and people forget that the Pegasus has Pathfinder, and so they're not protecting it for a turn, and they just swoop in and score it. Being able to nimble Pathfinder, double into terrain and turn and face at 3 attacks with Thunder 1 on 3s, you definitely don't want this in your flank or your rear. Incredibly good unit. Take as many as you can afford to put in your list.
Well, 3 is the right answer, isn't it?
As they let you. If they let 4, I will take 4.
80 points seems like a steal. And, speed 10, hits on 3s, defense 4, 10, 12 nerve. It's nothing. If you look at any of those individual stats, nothing's like, oh, that's broken. But it's the combination of all those things that add up to a great tool for 80 points.
And they're cheap enough to throw away when you need to, and cheap enough to protect when you need, and good enough to protect when you need to. So you can really think about the game and go, how are the Pegasus going to be best used in this game? And you can change what you do with them. Sometimes you're hiding them the whole game to sweep in and score at the end. Sometimes you're throwing them away to protect flanks of your Forsaken Hordes when they go in. Sky's the limit. Very good unit.
Well, next up we have Titans. And I have to ask, guys, the only Titan they have is the Greater Earth Elemental. First of all, thematically, it makes no sense. Have you guys ever taken this thing?
I have a model, and I've used it because I wanted to use it, and I've used it in a couple of games, but it's really, from a list perspective, it makes no sense. I just love the model.
Yeah, I agree. Nerve 19, dash 19, unit strength 2, defense 6 is pretty good for scoring with, but it just doesn't fit the list as well as other options, so I wouldn't do it.
Can we get a Forest Dragon maybe here? I mean, that would be more interesting than greater earth elemental. Again, maybe that's not, dragons typically are more expensive, but I'm just wondering, what are your ideas for a better Titan that fits the theme more and might fill a hole that you currently have in the list?
I don't feel that every list needs a Titan. I mean, the fact that it doesn't have a Titan is one of the things that makes it different to other lists, right? We shouldn't all have every type of unit.
Well, at least you didn't say we need a Phoenix.
Oh, we could use a Phoenix.
All right, well, we'll keep trugging along. We're going to get into the heroes now. It's hard to decide where you're going to start, but let's start with the one that I don't actually think I've ever seen anybody play, but I'm sure I'm wrong. The Naiad Stalker. Is that something you guys have ever taken?
I have.
I mean, because I think you literally have made it a mission to try all these units and play them.
Yeah, because, I mean, how do you know what works best if you haven't tried it, right? That's something that I learned from Jeff Drake, which is use everything that people look down the nose at, because you will find things when you use them that nobody saw, right? So, I like having a fourth chaff. So the question is, you can only have 3 pigs. I will have a fourth if I could, but since I can't, what can be my fourth chaff? So he's one option. An Exemplar of the Brotherhood is an option. There is different options that you can have. And what I loved about him is that in my list, I got no shooting. Once I did away with the heart pierces, then I went down to 0 shooting. So to be able to have those 4 little shots, right, when you grind down enemy units that end up with 10 wounds on them, 15 wounds on them, and they still are sitting on the table, to have something that can just ping and take things away. And also, when you need to hold up an enemy unit, if you've got him on terrain and he's got ensnare, he can get charged. And he's defense 4, he's not 3, he's got regen 4. I like him. I like him. I have used him in quite a few games. He's not in my current list because I ended up swapping it for something else, but I think he's playable.
Yeah, you look at the stats, right, and you're like, he's pretty good on what he's got access to. The ensnare and the regen, and those 4 shots on 4s with piercing 1, and he can get where he needs to for those. For me, it's just the 95 points makes him very hard to fit when I'm trying to get a lot of synergies with the list, and so all the heroes that I'm taking tend to need to be adding something, to the rest of the list. Mm-hmm. 95 points for me is just a bit too much. But, interesting looking hero, doesn't fit for me though.
And we should mention he's speed 6, melee 3, range 4, defense 4. So he's got decent stats, right? He has 95 points and the 4 attacks and 11, 13 nerve. But he has all the special rules, right? Crushing strength 1, ensnare, individual, inspiring,
stealthy as well. So.
Pathfinder, regeneration 4+, and individual. So he's got everything. It goes back to what we talked about, the 18-inch range shooting, which is a thing, and he's piercing 1. So, I mean, to Marcelo's point, though, if you needed something that maybe pick damage on chaff, and that's pretty resilient in the sense of it'd be very hard to counter shoot him, right? Because especially if he's in terrain, he's stealthy, he's an individual, it stacks, right? And it makes him very more resilient in that, right? Now, if you charge him in terrain, the ensnare and the -1 for being hindered, that stacks as well. So I can see a use. Just 95 points. It is pricey, but it's all about the list synergy you're trying to build. And if you need those couple extra points to just, that unit got away or got out of Ark of the Forsaken, put that last wound, put another wound on him. Let's take another test, right? I mean, there is that ability. But with that, let's jump over to the hero that a lot of people use. He's famous in a lot of different lists, but the Druid, right? He's a level 1 spellcaster. And he's speed 5, melee 5, defense 4, 1 attack, 10, 12 nerve, and he is now 45 points because it's that a la carte thing. Because now you pay 10 points for heal, and he's got access to heal, and he's got all the things you would normally have, like mounts and lightning bolt and surge and all that. But Bane Chant, and what's interesting is he has elemental and verdant special rule, which verdant doesn't matter in this list, right? Because you don't have access to things that trigger it. Or am I wrong? Yeah.
No.
And elemental, you don't have Ring of Harmony, right? So does that matter as well? 45 points for caster. I'm assuming this is, if you need a cheap caster, this is your default option.
So the Druid is what every banner bearer wishes they were, because at 45 points for an inspiring individual, he is very cheap. And then the options you get with the spells on top of that Oh, and he's got Pathfinder, right? So it's just as an Inspirer, he can double
And his
through
Bane
terrain.
chance cheaper than the book, right? The Loot of Insatiable Darkness, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you often get that though with they'll be cheaper than the items when they're on a character. See, the interesting thing is the Druid can take Lightning Bolt. It's only Lightning Bolt 2, but if you take the Conjurer Staff, which you should almost always do, that's 3 Lightning Bolt shots at 24 inches with Piercing 1. So I'd prefer, if you want something like the Stalker to maybe shoot some wounds. Obviously, it doesn't have the melee potential, but it is an Inspirer. So if you want the ability to throw out a couple of shots at range, I would rather have the Druid with a Conjurer Staff. And maybe then if you're using command dice, you can do a reroll to wound on them as well, and you're likely to sneak a wound through. But all the spells the Druid gets, so you really want the Conjure Staff on this guy because all the spells he can take are quite cheap, but they're low dice. So Conjure Staff basically adds 1 dice to all of those spells. And because they're so cheap, you can take several different spells, not like some of the other spellcasters, the changes that they've had now where they're cheaper, but all their spells cost a lot. That didn't really seem to hit the Druid because they're all 10, 20 points per spell, which is an incredible bargain.
So did someone go to the grocery store and said, we're going to buy a combo meal, and so the Druid's going to be cheaper, but we're going to make the unicorn pay?
The poor unicorn. But yeah, Druid very good. You can kit out the spells for whatever list you're doing, and he will work. He's pretty much always my third hero choice.
Marcelo, same question to you. How are you using the Druid?
I've used it. He's not in my current list because I've only got just the Green Lady as the only caster. But when I loved putting Pension on it and heal. And the Inspiring, like Luke said, I think he's great for the points. I used to only ever have 1 as my second individual. I don't like too many individuals because they don't score. But I ended up just focusing on an all combat list. So he came out, and now I just have items on units, which I find are more reliable than Magic, right? Because Pension, even with the staff, seems to never come when you really need it. Like on that very key fight when you really want it, it just doesn't happen. But I think it's great.
Well, let's jump over and talk about the unicorn. He's still 120 points, even though they took away the heal. So now heal is separate, and you got to pay an additional 35 points. He is still speed 10. He's still melee 3+. He's still defense 5+. Right? He's still got 3 attacks. He's 12, 14 nerve. There's a lot to like, but it is a little bit on the pricier side. He does have Crushing Strength 1, Individual, Inspiring, Pathfinder, and Thunder Charge 1, and you still have the ability to upgrade, to height 4 to basically a Pegasus, right? For 25 points, and then you can get Lightning Bolt, Wind Blast, and Bastion. But did you used to use the unicorn, and now you don't?
I used to have a minimum of 2 unicorns in the list. I used to love having 3 Pegasus and 2 unicorns. 5 Chaff, 5 Hammers. That was like my favorite list. But they just priced it out. I mean, to keep it the same points and drop every single spell, because it's still an individual. So if he doesn't wound with his 3 attacks, even though you normally give him something like Blade of Slashing or, the Smashing, you would give him these little items. Still an individual. I love them, but at the current cost, I think they over nerfed it. I would have hoped that maybe they dropped it from 120 to 100 and still buy spells. Maybe made it an extra 10 points more. But they killed it to the point where it just doesn't work anymore, to me.
Yeah, I used to have them for my nature list, but they got nerfed before I started playing Green Lady, so I haven't run them because they are just you just can't justify the points, I don't think.
And in terms of Tom Annis, he says, does anyone have the nerve to argue that the unicorn wasn't undercosted? I don't think we're saying that. It was undercosted. No. It's just removing heal 5 and making you pay 35 points is just a bridge too far. Maybe if they said, you know what, you just get heal 3 for free, or maybe you did what Marcelo said, which it's now 100, right? But you still get to keep, and you buy the spell. I mean, something where it doesn't feel like a double whammy, because at this point, heal 5 on that unicorn is 155 points. And now you're into a different, that's no longer like pure chaff. It's a different a different animal. And the fact, Marcelo brought up, it's an individual, so you're not doubling and tripling attacks. Stop talking about nature. Let's talk about knights. That's what we're here to talk about. And the next one we got up is Exemplar Redeemer. He is speed 8, melee 3, defense 5. He's got 7 attacks, 13, 15 nerve, and 180 points. He does now have the option to buy Vial of Sacred Water in Clash of Kings 2025. Crushing Strength 2, Headstrong, Individual, Inspiring, Mighty, Regeneration 5+. I see all that, and he has the ability to mount on a Winged Unicorn for additional 25 points. So that makes it 205 points. I compare him to General on a Winged Beast from Kingdoms of Men, and I like this guy a little bit better. He doesn't have the extra Thunder Charge, but a lot of the other things he does have, I do actually like. So, talk to me about this guy. He's not terribly expensive.
Maybe a little. I'll let Marcelo loves him, so I'll let Marcelo talk about why he's so great, and then I'll tell you why I don't play him. So
I actually think that the General on a Winged Beast for Kingdoms of Men is actually much better for the price, because it's about 20-30 points less, and it's got an extra Thunder, and it's height 5, not height 4. And all those things make the Kingdoms of Men version far better than this. But when you have, Luke and I have quite a few Forsaken, you find that these Forsakens end up with far flanks, right? And they're away from the Inspiring. So I feel like I need to pair them up with an Inspiring unit that's going to keep up. So I like having one of these guys. I give them Brew of Haste, so that, because even though you tell people that it charges 22 inches, and you repeat it 3 times in a game, when they're still measuring, they're still not really seeing the threat. And he catches people out, and you end up charging things on back lines just because you have that extra couple of inches. And if you're going to grind with, if you're going to be grinding with your Forsaken, you want to make sure that it's Inspiring, so that a lucky 11 or 12 doesn't take them off the table.
Yeah, so when you compare, this is 2 units in one. So there's a cavalry hero, and there's a large cavalry hero. I think as a cavalry hero, he's very expensive for what he gives you, and I would rather take the Champion of the Green Lady for a few more points. And get all the extra benefits. So the Fearless, the Strider, the Rallying, and all those sorts of things. So then it comes down to, what about on a Unicorn, and now he's a large cav flyer. It's a bit sad that every other similar unit in other lists is not only significantly cheaper, they also have extra nerve. This guy is 13-15 for some reason, whereas in every other list, they're 14-16. And then also, just when he gets priced up to 205, he's got the regen, which is something nice that the others don't have. 205 points for that, plus if you're putting items on them, is starting to get very, very expensive. I would rather see him come down 5 or 10 points and go up a nerve, and then that's where I'd be considering him. But where he is at the moment, I think he's just not quite there for me and how I play it, for the points that you're paying.
I guess I'm wondering too, when you compare him to the Kingdoms of Men, General on Winged Beast, that's 15 points less when you take the upgrade here. That guy has a clear role. He is he's going to go up a flank. He's 190 points, but what his job is: Crushing Strength 2. Thunder Charge 1. He's got, 7 attacks. His job is to get into combat. So I guess what I'm saying is, you're paying for maybe more stuff here that maybe you use, maybe you don't. I don't know. But, hey, that's why, not every unit's going to be perfectly efficient in all cases. So it's nice to have the choice. We did already touch on the Devoted, so now we'll jump over to the Exemplar Adjutant. I feel like I'm Matt Crozier now. Not knowing how to pronounce stuff. But this gentleman is a speed 5, melee 5+, defense 4. He is 1 attack, 10-12, nerf, and he is 50 points. And he has Headstrong, Inspiring, and Individual, and he can be mounted on a horse for 25 points. And now he has Very Inspiring, right? Instead of just regular Inspiring. And he has a rule called Entangling Roots. In the movement phase, after this unit has completed its order, nominate one enemy unit within 18 inches. This unit cannot use the Fury and Headstrong special rules for the duration of the next turn. It sounds super situational. But it sounds like if you're in that right situation, it's a real gotcha, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, the 50, well, I guess 75 points if you're mounting him on a horse. But is this, the question that we have is a great question. It's really what I'm thinking. The exemplar is a bit of an oddball compared to other faction banner bearers. Does he hold up in your opinion? What do you guys think?
I don't think it's worth it. I think, Luke was talking about the druids before. If I'm going to spend that kind of points, you get a lot more for your points with a druid where you're still getting inspiring. And you also get a spell. I think that his special rule is so situational that you will never use it.
Yeah, I'd love it to happen, and because it's such a where did that go? Oh no, it'd be fantastic for it to work, but it is so situational. Whereas the druid, you can take a spell that's not situational, like heal or bane chant are almost always good. So the druid just gives you options that this guy doesn't have. Very inspiring is nice, but I never choose one inspirer over another just for that reason. It's just a nice to have when it's there.
We have a lot of inspiring in this army.
Yeah.
Like how many inspiring do you have in your list, Luke?
I just run 3.
Okay, just 3, right? A lot of lists struggle to get 3. I run 5. So Green Lady, I think, is blessed with a lot of inspiring options.
I want a rookie, but if you're going to take this guy on foot, you just take the druid every day for 5 points less, because then you at least have the option to take Bane Chant, which is cheaper than the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. And if you're putting him on a horse, I just don't know what the hell you're doing, because you have other sources of inspiring that can, be fast and go where it needs to be, rather than this guy at 75 points.
Well, 55 points buys you a druid on foot with either heal or mindfog. And both of those are Mindfog, being able to throw a Mindfog out late in the game can be quite handy.
All right, next up we have the Exemplar of the Brotherhood. He, again, is an infantry guy, but he can be mounted on a horse for 25 points, just like the guy above, and he has access to the Vial of Sacred Water. And it's interesting that the guy we just talked about doesn't have access to the Vial of Sacred Water. I don't know why they wouldn't just give it to him. I mean, if you're paying 5 points for it, who cares? But this guy is speed 5, melee 3, defense 5, 3 attacks, 11, 13, nerve, and 50 points. Crushing strength 1, headstrong, and individual. And again, you can mount him on a horse for 25 points and give him water. He's the same points as the one we just looked at. And he's a little better. I'm just thinking,
no inspiring.
Okay, no inspiring. But he's got crushing strength 1. So I don't know. I guess, is this really the same? This is even, in my mind, is this even less of a thing? Or are you going to, I guess the Kingdoms of Men hero, right? This is kind of their version of him, right? But I don't know. Is this something you guys use?
Yeah, I put him on a horse and give him burial slashing. He's my 4th chaff. So if I'm facing flyers or enemy cavalry, he's the guy that I send forward that I'm quite okay to be charged, because then, he's still defense 5. So he's still an individual, which means he can run in any direction to ground a flyer or ground a cavalry unit. And I don't mind if he gets charged, because then I can counter charge with my hammers. So I would prefer to have 5 chaff, but I always have a minimum of 4. And he's a great 4th chaff.
Yeah, I don't play him, but he's the same as all the other 3 attack heroes that you put on a horse. That's how you play them. Use them to ground flyers behind your lines, or run out and hold something up for a turn. Because once he puts that wound on, they can't charge through him. I think he's totally fine. And for 75 points for that, and 80, like Marcelo said, with a Blade of Slashing or something like that, that's the same price as a peg, and you can't buy 4 pegs, so you may as well buy this guy.
Now, we're almost to the end of this list. We only have 2 more units, and I guess I'm asking you guys, is the list just that short, or are you guys just this damn good? Because we're not even at 2 hours, and we're almost through the list.
There's only 2 of us giving opinions.
That does help. That does. And to be fair, Marcelo has no opinions, right? He keeps them very tight to his chest. He doesn't like to share his opinions. So, all right, well, let's get into the unique units, and we'll end with the Green Lady, because I think that's fitting, given that she's kind of key to the theme of this army. But we'll start with her champion of the Green Lady, who is a unique hero, right? Speed 8, melee 3+, defense 5. He's got 7 attacks, dash 15, and 210 points. Crushing Strength 2, individual, inspiring, mighty, first source of mighty we've seen on an individual. Rally, 1 for Sacred Water, which is great, right? Because if you're giving all your guys the Sacred Water vial, and I'm assuming the water elementals already have it because they're water. Is that right? Or do they have to pay for that too?
Yes. Nope, they've got it.
And then Regeneration 4 plus and Strider. He sounds amazing. But then we have a question as the champion of the Green Lady. What went wrong with him? Is he too pricey? Is it because he doesn't score or something else entirely? So first question to you guys to kind of follow up on what Alexi's asking here. Do you guys use him? And if you don't, is there something that should be changed to make him more useful?
I have used him. He was fantastic. I wish he was dash 16 for the points instead of 15, but it's not a reason to not take him if you want him. 210 is very expensive for a non-scoring individual, but rallying on anything that you've got, Strider is so tanky. Like, he's always going back in with the Fearless defense 5 regen 4 up, which is the best regen in the list. His I think the only other one, Greater Water Elementals, I think have 4 as well. But yeah, he's a very good all round unit. Just, he is very pricey, so it does depend how much you're spending on all your other units. To fit him in, I did drop what would have been a 6th Forsaken Horde in the list down to a Knight Regiment, which gave me opened up the points I needed to take him, and he was very good.
He's too expensive. He costs more than the regular unit of Knights with Pathfinder. I would take another regiment over an individual any day.
Unit strength 3 versus 0.
Yeah, so I want to take him. He's so thematic. You want to bring him into the list. Frankly, I don't think he should be worth more than 150 points. So he's so far off from when he needs to be that he just, it's not worth taking.
I think so. I've heard people say he's a trap. When I've run him, I won a tournament with him, right? Like, that doesn't feel like a trap. But I think he's got so much going on. You have to know how you're going to use him, and you have to use him well and in the right places at the right times for him to be valuable enough. If you're not going to use him as absolutely as effectively as possible, then he is way too many points and you shouldn't take him. Like, you have to really know what you're going to be doing with him before you go in.
So tell us how the best way to use him looks.
Yeah, a lot of the time you're pushing him up, you're pushing him forward, as far forward as you can without getting him completely minced with multi-charges. He's excellent, particularly into terrain at holding units up. So he can, and then to run away, right? So he can go into a unit, strip off Thunder or whatever, hold them up for a turn, let you clear off some other things. Then he can go somewhere else, do something else with his individual, and someone else can come into the unit that he was just holding up. Not only that, the rallying 1 for Sacred Water is huge because basically the entire list has Sacred Water. So getting those up to 16, 18 Forsaken Hordes with all the heal and all that you've got makes your grind ability just that much better. And particularly running in with a regiment of knights as well. If you can put him somewhere that's outpacing a flank, the two of them going into a unit with the Pathfinder on the knights and stuff can put a lot of wounds on something. So yeah, it's just any tanky cavalry individual that you're running, he runs pretty similarly, but wants to be near your units more than a lot of those. Like a vampire on horse is happy to go off by himself and do stuff. You can use this guy in similar ways, but you want to sort of stage it so that he can do that, but he's still near your units to give those benefits when he does it.
Yeah, the last unit we've got is the definitive reason why we have nature, right? Which is the Avatar of the Green Lady. And she's obviously a limited unit just to 1. She's speed 10, melee 5, defense 5, 1 attack, 13, 15 nerve, and 150 points. And all the special rules, right? Fly, individual, inspiring, Pathfinder, regen 5 plus. And at the start of each of your turns, you may choose for this unit to have either Cloak of Death or Radiance of Life. And she's got heal 6. Go back and listen to the Forces of Nature review. We kind of detail how she has changed a lot from when we started in 2nd edition to where we are today. But as she sits today, guys, if you're going to take an individual, is this one of the ones you're thinking about?
Yeah, she's been in every list that I've run. Just what she gives you. The speed 10 fly lets you put inspiring wherever you need it. You can go behind, you can jump behind their lines, Cloak of Death, half their army, and be out of their charge range. So she's not going to get slapped. And if she does get slapped, defense 5, 13, 15 is still pretty survivable. Plus the Radiance of Life, she starts getting that back as she goes. So, Cloak of Death, cannot stress this enough. It pops Gnome Glass Shield. So that's a great tool to have in your belt, because you don't want these Gnome Glass characters running into your Forsaken Hordes and grounding them for a turn, potentially 2 or 3 turns by the time you chew through the Gnome Glass Shield. Something like a Seductress with Gnome Glass and Snare, they can hold up your Forsaken Horde for a number of turns. If you can get the Cloak of Death on there to pop that shield before your regiment, your horde attacks them, well, they're probably dying in 1 turn now. So they're no longer a problem. So that's an extremely good use for her. I wait, if they've got Gnome Glass on a character, like a horse or a flying character, I wait and to deploy her until I know where that character's going, and she goes hunting that Gnome Glass. Radiance of Life, obviously fantastic. Being able to, with all the culmination of heal and regen that the list has, almost everything can be on full hit points every turn. It's just great utility.
And heal 6.
Yeah, so good.
So let's not forget that. So I always take her as well for all the reasons that Luke mentioned. I think when you count how many wounds does she do in a game, right? When you do what Luke just mentioned of going in and either pop behind the enemy line, or even amongst your units once they actually hit the enemy line, she might do 20, 30 wounds in a game. In how many games did you not pop a unit because of only 1 or 2 wounds? And she gives you that 1 or 2 wounds, right? Because when you have the hammers going in that you have to break the enemy unit, just doing that 1 or 2 wounds can make all the difference.
Yeah, I'll tell you why jumping behind their lines is really great. So it's not just that you can get better coverage generally of the Cloak of Death and how many wounds you're putting out, but now she's not in the way when you go to reform. So it's very hard often to position her to get maximum Cloak of Death, but still be out of the way if you kill something and want to reform and turn somewhere. So if you jump over the other side of the lines, you can be within 6 inches of your units for inspiring, get more Cloak of Death dished out, and be out of the way of both being charged by them and also of your units reforming and turning.
And even if she does get charged, she's pretty tanky.
Yeah. Def 5.
15, defense 5, regen, and even if she can't cast heal, she can still Cloak of Death after she's been disrupted.
And as an individual, even once the flies stripped, she can just walk away 10 inches. It's not a problem.
Run 20 and Cloak of Death.
All right, well, that is the army list. Let's take another quick commercial break, and we'll get back and we'll talk about the army, how it sits in the greater meta of Kings of War, and we'll get into things like scenarios, terrain, and everybody's favorite question, like how do you build armies for this list? So we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Alan Beener, the king of Nerdhammer, and you're listening to Countercharge.
Welcome back to Countercharge. We're 8 months or so removed from when they launched Clash of Kings 2025. Give me a sense of how you feel the army sits after Clash of Kings 2025.
It's hard to call something S tier when it doesn't have powerhouse builds in multiple categories, I think. In terms of an alpha army, yeah, it's one of the best ones that you can do, but that's quite narrow. When it's like Ratkin Slaves, for example, have a fantastic build that they can do, but it's just the one build and everything else is terrible, right? So how can you possibly put them up the top? These guys are kind of the same. I think they've got a lot of decent builds, but they're not top of what you can do compared to other armies when you're not playing alpha. I think they're in a good place just through some of the points changes and whatnot for the supporting units that happened with Clash. So they are in a very good place. They don't do shooting very well, as we've touched on. So combined arms is quite tricky to build. It is a top tier alpha strike army. It's not the most
effective list.
Yeah, exactly. It's a top tier alpha army, and then it's fine in some of the other build types.
As an alpha strike, it's a very strong army. I mean, there's a reason why Luke and I have won so many tournaments with it. It's that the speed. Now, I think that Kings of War, one of the things I love about rank and flanks is that you win the game in the movement phase. That's like the most important phase. And when you have speed, it gives you an advantage in the movement phase. And that speed mitigates other threats, right? Speed mitigates shooting. Speed mitigates terrain in that you can go over it, or that even if you go into terrain, you can still go a fair amount of distance into it. So I think that in terms of, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why I ended up moving from Pradamark to Order of the Green Ladies. I thought, okay, well, it's a similar theme list, but it's a much stronger list. So I would put it, but even in an alpha build, you can build very alpha-likes, very alpha types. Like Luke's flying alpha is very different to my primarily ground-based alpha. Right? So, he loves druids and spell support. I don't have any. So I only have Green Lady, nothing else, no druids. So I think that even though it has a good build, there is different ways to build a good build that suit your personality and how you like to play.
Is there anything this is the absolute most important thing I would do to fix the army or to improve it? What would that be?
The unicorns. I think the unicorns are, the two things I would do is that I think that the unicorns are one of the things that gave it flavor and uniqueness. And because you could have the fact that you would have a lot more lightning bolts, and I would have more shooting, and I would have less hammers. So what they did by nerfing the unicorn was reduce the number of ways you could build the list. Right? They actually made it more monochrome by taking away shooting options. So, like lightning bolt and a more combined arms. At least used to be more combined arms before they nerfed the unicorn than it is today. So I would love to see that back. And I would love to see the water side, because it's it goes to the lore of the army, more integrated. Maybe the way that Northern Alliance, has its frozen rule and how it has a lot more synergies in the list. I would hope that when they do Green Lady, they have more water synergies than they have.
So they can throw water on the floor and people slip, and now they're hindered.
It could be. Why not, Rob?
Yeah, I think if the unicorn was still good with lightning bolt, for example, or if there was just a bit more shooting that you want to take, it makes heart piercers a bit more viable to get more critical mass of shooting. I think 2 or 3 heart piercers, if you've just had that bit more character support for shooting, that's the Naiad hunter thing only inspires self. Yeah, the stalker, it only inspires self. So, if we were back in the days where, you had conditional inspires, maybe that to inspire Naiads would be good, right? Because then to have them running as a shooting block, you might get through that bit more shooting that you sort of need to make combined arms more viable. But yeah, like with the place that it is at the moment, with the additional shooting support on top of the heart piercers, makes them very hard to take. So you don't want to take them anymore. So then you don't really want to take any shooting unless it's a little pip on something. So now you're not combined arms. What are you? And taking lots of infantry is quite slow. So you're sort of always getting pushed more and more towards the faster units, which I do count the particular formation, but I do count the War Elementals as a faster unit, like a fast anvil type unit, because they're speed 7 inherently, and then they're wild charge 1, so 15-inch charge range in the formation is very fast as far as units go. So
yeah, we're going to get in and talk about different types of builds. People have lots of questions, but I think you've already tackled Jose Vega's question about that mixed arms approach with 2 to 3 units of heart pierces versus pure Alpha Strike. I mean, I guess you would say if you want to be competitive, go Alpha Strike. If you want to have you can have maybe a thematic list, but I don't know how effective 2 to 3 units of heart piercers or any other type of shooting stuff that you may have, whether it's the Centaur Hunters. But I mean, just talk about that, like that combines arms list. Is that for fun?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I used to run more combined arms when you could support those shooting units with unicorns with lightning bolt, so that you could have a stronger shooting element. But since they nerfed the unicorns and the lightning bolt went away, having just 18-inch shooting and no other option, it just doesn't do it. So it kind of drives you, if you want an effective list, to be more Alpha Strike.
Well, let's get in and talk about some of these questions. We got a lot. I mean, in terms of the subject of questions, this is probably the one area that we have a lot of. So Philip Jordan Cox says, Green Lady generally gets played as high-speed alpha strike type list. What about a grind list? That's what he wants to know about. And Luke, maybe, he says earth elementals heal, etc. But like, I would argue the water elementals with the formation. So, you sort of have a quasi grind list with alpha strike elements, but maybe you want to take that first, and then maybe we'll throw it over to Marcelo.
Yeah, definitely not the Earth Elementals. I think we've touched on why. They just don't have any of those synergies that make them worthwhile. Absolutely, Green Lady, Water Elemental grind list backed up with some. At this point, right, when you're playing a slightly slower grindy list, I'm even more a fan of something like the Redemption Knights, but even a second wave of 1 or 2 Forsaken behind Water Elementals. And so taking the formation as a core and then taking more Water Elementals beyond that, maybe another Horde and another Greater, and then a couple of regiments of Water Elementals. That's a very tough grindy list to chew through, and then backed up by some really punchy things like Redemption Knights or Forsaken. You go into the Water Elementals, you probably don't kill them, and you get clapped back really, really hard. That's I've actually played against that. They didn't have Forsaken; they had just Knights and Redemption Knights, but that was a fairly new player. So I did end up winning that game, but I did find it very hard to chew through and to figure out what to go where with all that regen, all that heal, and then them playing in terrain. So now I'm hindered coming in. It's even harder to pop those units. It is a hell of a grind to go into, and I do really like that list.
Well, that's why you had water elementals, all right? That's what you need, right? Give me the Strider, baby. Yep. It's coming in.
Well, while Luke likes to take water elementals for grinding, I take redemptions for grinding. Because when you have 20 attacks and they have Brewer Sharpness, Blessing of the Gods, and Brewer Strength, and Regen 5, and the Green Lady around them with Heal 6, they can grind. They really can grind. So in those units, we have an Alpha Strike that can grind.
You guys touched a little bit on it, and I didn't really ask you this yet. Magical artifacts, right? Like, is this an army that you need to make sure that all your units have got the tools to be effective? But the counter to that would be if you got 5 hordes of Forsaken Knights, you're not buying magical artifacts for everything. So just talk to me about, Marcelo, kick us off. When you're putting magical artifacts, are they sort of nice to haves? Are they must haves?
I didn't have much in the way of magical artifacts when I had a more combined arms list. Now that it's more Alpha Strike, I feel that when you have Alpha Strike, you cannot afford to charge in and get stuck. That you really need to try and break, especially when you're going into the flanks. And if you want that Alpha Strike to also grind, then you need to give an items. So I have 5 hammers in mind, 2 Forsaken, 3 Redemption, and they all have items. So I do spend quite a bit on items.
And let's tackle some of these questions. Page Neo talks a little about shooting. He's asking specifically about shooting, but we covered, I think, most of his questions, but
yes.
He actually circles back to something we were talking about earlier, Marcelo, which is your Naiad Stalker with 4 shots. He's asking, is that what you're using to keep enemy chaff in check? And don't allow them to deploy in the open and run free. Is that what that unit's used for?
No, I feel like 4 shots is not enough to even try and get rid of chaff, because enemy chaff, especially if they're flying chaff, they're going to be behind the units. They're going to be protected. I try to bring enemy chaff in by putting my units in range of the enemy chaff, but out of range of their hammers, so that way I can still get a turn for that chaff to come in. I get rid of the chaff, and then I'm ready to charge the hammers. Either that, or that's what we have Peggy's for, right? Or my little hero running around with 3 attacks and slashing. That the use for me of that Naiad with the 4 shots, it's more to hold up enemy units, like as a 4th chaff, or to ping and wound units that already taken a lot of wounds but still around, that you just needed to take another nerve test.
Yeah, I kind of wish sometimes that I had a little bit of shooting in the list that I play. My only non-win at Clash was a draw against Trident Realms running 5 Tidal Swarms with shooting. And they were so hard for me to deal with because they were stopping me getting at the line, and if I charged them, obviously I'm getting charged and probably dying. So, but I'm not looking at heart piercers for that role. I'm looking more at what about a druid with extra lightning bolt? Something like that could be a way to go.
Luke, what about magical artifacts?
So I, as per my list builder studio, I tend to not really play too many artifacts on my duplicate units because I don't want to have to make that choice about about which unit I'm putting where and why. I think Strider Boots tends to be good in every alpha army, so I often like to fit that in. And then Conjure Staff, as I spoke about on the Druid, is really, really, if you're taking a Druid, like really, really probably do take Conjure Staff. So Strider Boots and Conjure Staff are the only must-haves for me. If there's some extra points somewhere, if I really need something on someone, then yeah. But I think this list, I played a little bit differently to Marcelo, obviously, and which is great because we have slightly different styles and you get to see that different perspective. I tend to prefer to try and double charge things or grind rather than one shot with one thing to the face. That's not really my style. So I don't take those items on those units. They become much too expensive for me, and I prefer more drops.
The next question I've got is kind of an interesting one because, I don't necessarily think we want to dissuade anybody, but, Ryan Lampion from from Reno, Nevada, he asks, fairly new player here and trying to build a good Order of the Green Lady list that will give my opponent options to think about. Not sure if I found my play style as I've only used Trident Realms. So going from Trident Realms to Order of the Green Lady seems like a pretty different animal. And so what tips would you give Ryan to make that transition? What, if you just assume he's playing Trident Realms traditionally, what does he got to change?
When we talk about unit types that make your opponents have to think, there's really two main ones. There's flyers, fast flyers, and there's surge. And this list has both. So not only do they have to worry if you're running a combination of things like, whether it's Knights or whether it's Forsaken and surgeable units with surge support, not only do they have to worry about staying out of certain ranges or in or whatever, then now they've got to think about surge. And if they go behind there, something can turn and surge, or maybe if they come forward to stop a flying horde, they could get surged in the flank. So this, I think a lot of my recent success with the list has probably come down to the combination of those two and the opponents having to think about them because they're both very hard archetypes to guard against, and you can run both, no problem.
Is this army new player friendly?
If I was talking to a new player, I would suggest that if they're new to Ranks and Flanks or new to Kings of War, that the first armies to play with are one where they can play Combined Arms and play more of a hammer and anvil type list so that they get to see how different elements work, right? Have some shooting, have some, hordes of infantry or something that can take a charge, have some hammers that you can counter charge with, play with all the elements until you find your style and you find what you like. Right? And then from there, you can look at armies that suit your style. Right? You can do Combined Arms with Order of the Green Lady, but you can do a better Combined Arms with other lists.
Yeah, like taking a variety of units, I think, is better than going ham. I really think the formation for a new player is probably quite good because it's got a few things that you have to be mindful of when you're playing, like thinking about surge, thinking about your auras that you've got and how to position units so that they can take advantage of them. But it's not disastrous if you mess that up because the core doesn't have to worry about those. Those are extra things that, if you move something out of an aura range by accident, it's not the end of the world. If you're not very good at setting up the surges, then it's not the end of the world. You don't need to do that to win, but it lets you start to learn and think about those things and how to play them. And then likewise, if you go all alpha, all flying, Forsaken or whatever, you're probably going to lose a lot because there's it is quite hard to play. It's not just charge to the face as soon as you can, right? Like that's the worst way to play an alpha army. So playing like your Order of the Thorn, a few regiments of those, maybe a couple of Heart Piercers, maybe a one Forsaken Horde, the Formation, and a Redemption Knights would be a really good core for a new player, I think.
Does this army force you to do unique things in deployment, or can you deploy it like most other armies?
I feel like the best way to play an army like this is to be able to surround your opponent. So you need to have fast elements in the flanks. You need to have, something that's going to hit hard in the center, whether you use Luke's more flyers or whether you use what I do, which is more regular cavalry that just hits hard. You need to dominate the movement phase.
How about terrain? I mean, you have some stuff that has some thunder charge, but usually has crushing strength. I mean, is terrain the end of the world for you, or not a problem? I guess if you take 5 hordes of flying peg knights, then it doesn't really matter if some of them are hindered.
Yeah, well, there's some decent terrain mitigation that you can take between the regular knights that can take Pathfinder and then Strider boots. Plus, again, the water elementals all have Strider, so there's a fair bit of terrain mitigation available on the list. And if you're playing Naiads and that sort of stuff, you want terrain, so you want to be in that terrain anyway. I think this is not the worst army for terrain. It's not the best army. It's just it's fine, pretty neutral.
Very much so.
Let's talk scenarios. I assume there's certain scenarios where an Alpha Strike, setting up for that kill shot is probably a pretty effective, and maybe there's ones where you don't want your flying units picking up loot tokens. So just talk to me about scenarios and the types that you think are better for this army, and the ones that maybe they may not struggle, but you have to be more diligent in the way you're approaching it.
My least favorite are scenarios that I have to pick up tokens, because cavalry and flyers don't like picking up tokens, right? I mean, that's the reason that I have men around retainers, so they can run around picking up tokens. Piggies can do that, okay, but I would rather use pigs as chaff. And my most favorites are the ones where I can just come to them later in the game, whether it's an objective marker, whether it's a zone of the board that I need to get to.
Yeah, I think raise or protect and raise can be quite good for us, because we can quite easily get unit strength in range to burn without too much hassle, and then come back and protect those later, or leave something back. The token scenarios are definitely some of the worst for us. I think push is really annoying because I don't have the men-at-arms retainers that you can put those on.
Do you give the tokens to your water elementals?
Yeah, it's water elementals in that case. Stockpile can be problematic as well, right? Because you've got nothing that really wants to sit on the token in the middle of the table picking up tokens
for 3 turns.
Yeah, well, so the way I run that is I move forward, I pick up a token, and then I drop it and move off, and then something comes in. It can pick up the dropped token and a stockpile token, and then it can do the same. It can drop them and move forward, and then something can come in and pick up all 3 later. So that's kind of the way you have to do that. But yeah, there's not really many scenarios that I think are like that bad. So token scenarios are definitely the worst ones, but and anything you can fly off and claim late, so control, pillage, any of those sort of scenarios where you can just move, go kill things, and then whatever you've got left, particularly nimble Pegasus that can sort of go almost anywhere, can just fly off and claim things at the end.
Let's just talk about general strategies, and I'll just throw some out there. Maybe, how you guys think about tackling these things. Are they bad matchups? But I would assume a heavily melee army is you're licking your chops, right? Because they're not shooting you on the way in. You're going to get the charge. And if you've done it right, they're not coming back.
Frankly, played well, we can face any army, right? And when I look at, when I lost games occasionally, it tends to be because I made mistakes, and the biggest mistake is going into soon, like Luke was saying. It's, going first when I should have chosen to go second, or not waiting an extra turn to go in. And what I struggle the most against is my own impatience, number one. Number two is armies that can wind blow you, pull you in, pull you out, disorder you, and move your units around. But even then, if I played it more patiently, I wouldn't have lost the game against them. So I think it's on us, not so much on the army that we're playing against.
Yeah, it depends on the melee army, I guess. Something like Ogres with Siegebreakers is very tough, because if they can, and they can easily stop double charges on Siegebreakers, you can't, they're so hard to punch through, and that kind of unit hits back as hard on a counter charge as they do on a charge. So you're not gaining anything by getting in first, except for putting wounds on them first, but you're not killing them. And then they're hitting back. And, if the double charge can be stopped, which, like I said, is very easy to do.
With so many heroes.
Yeah. So even just, when I play ogres against this kind of army, I'll put like my warlocks in front, because, no one wants to charge the warlock at this stage because they're getting hit back by siege breakers or whatever, but then the warlock's stopping the double charge on the siege breakers. So, it's very, very hard to play against that kind of army. And you're probably not charging till turn 4 or 5 against them, and just really pinpoint trying to take out certain things in certain places to score the objectives you need and not worry about the rest of the army.
What about horde armies? Like the Ratkin, the goblins. In a way, it can be a tar pit. Is this one of those things where you just have to be very careful of when you make what you go into, so that make sure that the follow up is clean? Or
this is where the ability to grind really comes into play, because instead of doubling in, you can actually go into a bunch of different, like obviously doubling a horde and taking it off is great. That's often not always the easiest thing to do, but being able to go into a bunch of these hordes with a bunch of different units, they might not kill things first time, hopefully waver something, but then hopefully not die to the hit back, and then next turn they can finish everything off and clean them up is an option. Not always the best. The thing with the Ratkin is plague pots can be a problem, but just be patient. So on the turn where you set up for this great charge and they pop plague pots on everything, go, all right, I'll back up 4 inches and I'll go in next turn when you don't have the plague pots. So it's not the worst. I think Goblin Horde with lots of shooting, so they're combined, we've got different archetypes here, one's horde and one's shooty. Well, goblins can do both at the same time, and that's where it starts to become a problem.
I liked your comment, though, that even though you're going to go in and you may not pop anything, that's okay if you're tying everything else up. The stuff that's going to hit you in the flank, that's okay, because they're not coming in, because everything is just locked down, because one unit on one unit, you're better. In a way, you can kind of, hold the line of scrimmage. How about shooty armies? Not a problem for you? I mean, you guys aren't taking Stealthy Bubble, right? So, well, I guess, Marcelo, you don't play in the Southeast, so it's fine.
No, look, I played against, you had Alan Biner in...
Force of Nature. And a list builder recently. Great player. Filthy.
Yes.
You don't think he's that filthy? You should have heard some of the stuff I had to cut out. It was so filthy.
No, he is. He's got a great... and he put together, just for me, a great Twilight King list with a lot of the units that have that 9-inch shooting, and Lathel, and the Summoner Crowns, and that I was impatient with that list, and he tear me apart with it. So he got his first win in a game that we played in a tournament for quite a while, and the guy was so happy. So it just shows that no matter how well we play these, hey, you can still beat us.
How does that make you feel, Marcelo, that you're such a big boogeyman that you have people that are literally making and orchestrating lists just to beat your lists?
Because I don't take so many flyers, I'm like, look, I still have friends.
Well, I had someone locally, Max, who I did end up playing him at this tournament, and he did beat me. But he took an all phalanx goblin army specifically to counter my flyers, and I took Northern Alliance trolls. And he's like, "What's going on?" But he still won.
It's like that episode in Princess Bride where they're switching the poison cups.
Yeah. But shooting armies in general, look, if they take enough shooting that they can pop a unit into turn, that's very bad times. If they're not, then it's very good times, because we've got the heal to stand it, or to weather it. How we play against shooting armies is use terrain until we have to go in, and then heal back things. Also spreading out. So if people have really long range shooting, it's a lot harder to do. But when things have 18 and 24 inches, it's kind of like the way you play against throwing dogs, right? So that's actually probably a really good one to talk about here, is playing dwarves with throwing mastiffs. They have a pretty decent threat range, particularly if you're running lots of cav. If flyers, you can kind of stay out a bit better, but with the cav, you kind of get a bit closer. What you got to do is count the dogs. So you go, I'm within that, I'm not within that. I can take 2. I can't take 3. So I'll make sure I'm out of the range of 1, but I'm in 2. So they might get lucky and pop something or waver it, but in general, you can weather that. And being dwarves, they know they're slow. They have to throw their dogs when they have the chance, because they know they're not getting another one. So even though they know they can't kill you with them, they're going to throw them anyway. And you've got the heal to get those wounds back. They're just hoping for a waiver, right? But it's about counting how many units you're in range of and making sure that you're not within range of too many. So there's a lot of spreading out. There's a lot of measuring every unit and that sort of thing, just to make sure you're not going to die in one go.
Yeah, I love putting my units of redemptions within range of 1 or 2 the Dwarf units, so that between Region 5 and the Green Lady with heal, you just get rid of all the damage dogs did within a turn or two.
Yeah, and so that's great for you, but they have to do it, right? Like, they know that it's bad, but they know they're not going to get another chance to throw them, so they just have to do it and hope for the lucky waiver. But again, there's a fair bit of headstrong going on in this army as well, so even with the waiver, you're often still being able to go in anyway.
It's a good chance.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a couple questions from Hong Wen Su. A couple things he wants to know about is, you have a lot of flyers typically in your army, or at least some. How do you deal with multiple flyers? I guess he means maybe multiple flyers against you. How do you, does it matter? I mean, you got more flyers than they do, then it's okay? Or
Pegasus, get into their flyers first and ground them.
Yeah, and I use my Exemplar of the Brotherhood in the same way as the Pegasus. Throw them forward. They can either charge our Pegasus and kill them. That's okay. If we're going to counter charge and take a hammer off the table. And if they don't, then we charge in first and ground them and charge them next. So I don't mind facing flyers.
And he wants to know about when you're facing grindy armies. I assume it's either kill what you hit in one turn, or you bring things like the formation where you have your own grind, and that's going to allow you to tie up those units and then maybe get flanks. But just talk to me about grinding.
Well, I don't think it's any different to any other type of army, right? Luke talked about how he grinds. I grind with redemption. And ideally, we don't want to have to grind. So we're still trying to go in and wiping out a unit. I think the one thing that we probably haven't talked enough about is the use of, chaff and hammers and how each one actually works together. And that's really what makes the army work really well, is the fact that you can go and, try and double charge a unit and then hold up anything that can counter charge you with things like Pegasus. So that you can then give yourself time, even if you have to grind and don't kill them in one turn and you need that second turn to kill them, then they kill your pegs, but then you're facing down the flank. Ideally, you avoid grinding, but we can grind if we have to.
Yeah, that's a good call out, because we have spoken a few times about grinding, and I think we're of the same mind, which is it's nice if you have to grind that you can, but we really don't want to be grinding. That's just the last option. Yeah, so against grindy armies, like Marcelo said, you want to try and jockey for that position where you can take something out. Because once you've taken something out, there's a hole in the line, and now you're facing down the flanks and that sort of stuff, and you've got a lot more options. Whether that's throwing something in and giving it the option, like the ability to grind for a couple of turns while the rest of your stuff stays ready and positions better for once it's dead, or whether you go in with a bunch of things and grind all them, or just look for that double charge to take something out. It's once you get a hole, that's where they've got problems. So it's just finding that hole.
And we do have a question from Kyle Poole. We're not going to bother because he's not worth the effort. But I'm just curious, Marcelo, how many times have you beaten Kyle Poole?
I've never played him. I want to.
And we know Luke hasn't, unless it's put on a UB tournament.
No. I've watched him play plenty of times on UB, but I haven't played against him on UB.
Kyle, maybe you should go play better players and then come back.
I would love to play Kyle. He's a fun guy.
He gave me the list for Adepticon. I was like, this is what I got. He made me a list, and it was a hell of a fun time to play. Here's a crazy question, but, and maybe you don't have an answer, but what points does this army play best at?
Well, I love playing 2300. That's what we play in the US a lot. And I just don't enjoy playing smaller sizes. And I think bigger sizes, the game takes too long. So for me, I love 2300, not because the army plays based at that point, just because that's my preferred point size, no matter what army.
I do prefer 2300 as a points level. I do think that this army plays better at 2300 or more as well. I do like different points levels, but not with this army. So I really like when we have a tournament where we're like, let's do 1850 or something strange, because it gets the list building juices flowing, and you go back through all the armies you've got, and you're like, okay, what do I feel is really good at this point? Like, what do I like at this points level? But I don't think Green Lady is that, just because all the things you want to take are quite expensive. So it's and they don't really have as many good options for like dropping down a rung to something not quite as effective, because now it totally changes how it plays.
Well, if you came to Kings of Memphis, we're playing 2,020 points.
should do 2025 because that's the year. So,
another question I have is you touched on it a little bit earlier, Marcelo. Is this an army you want to go first or you want to go second?
I think it's very scenario dependent. I think that I've been guilty of making the mistake that I always take first if I can, because I just want to go across the board and punch him as quickly as possible. But that's when you lose games. And part of learning the skill and getting good with this army is just because you can go fast, it doesn't mean you have to. And learning when you use that speed and when you don't use that speed is what ends up winning you games.
That's how I know Marcelo knows what he's talking about with this army, because that's exactly that's exactly right, and a lot of people get that wrong. I think, by default, go first in every. That's just the default. If you're not sure, then you probably go first. But there's a few matchups and a few scenarios where it's definitely better to go second. In particular, the problem that we've spoken about with heart piercers, right? You go first with heart piercers, you're not shooting turn one, and a lot of armies have that problem, and particularly if they're not themselves very fast. So at least, we can, if we go first with heart piercers, the heart piercers aren't shooting, but our army's getting into a really good position to start threatening you straight away. A lot of armies have that shorter range shooting, and they don't have those fast threats as well. Particularly thinking about, dwarves and some of those. So if they can't touch you turn one, depending upon the scenario, it might very well be a good idea for you to go second.
Some of the games I remember most painfully losing at Masters and more recently against Talon, where when I'm playing against an army that has Wind Blast, that has the ability to pull you and push you, and you're playing an objective scenario, you should always try and go second. Because where I've made the mistake of going first and just blow you away from the objectives on the last turn of the game, just because you can go first and go fast, it doesn't mean you should.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, we're at the part of the show. What I would love you guys to pull up a list, maybe something, maybe Marcelo, your Adepticon list or whatever you're currently, or, maybe share the one that you lost to Alan with. I don't know. But whatever you want to, maybe not, because maybe we want a winning list, but, pick a list and just walk us through it and maybe showcase, some of the things we've just been talking about, why you chose the units you chose, kind of distill down the last 2.5 hours into 5 minutes.
So the list that I used at Adepticon, where I came equal first in battle points with Jeff Shilton, and that I won the winter with, and that I also lost against Talon with in a more recent tournament. It's really the same list. And that's got 2-minute arm retainers, regiments, because they capture all the objectives and, capture tokens and do the things that my flyers don't like to do. 3 units of redemption that are fully kitted out with sharpness, blessing of the gods, and brewer strength, so that it allows them to grind really well. 2 forsaken, 1 with drunken realm for the extra thunder, and 1 with Jesse's boots of striding for that terrain mitigation. And they typically go on flanks. 3 Peggies, only because I can't have 4. Otherwise, I will have 4 Peggies. An exemplar of the Brotherhood, mounted on a horse with blade of slashing, to be the 4th chaff unit that holds units up. Green Lady, because she's amazing. She essentially does more damage than most other units, just does it more stealthily, and keeps your units alive, which is even more important. And a flying exemplar Redeemer with Brew of Haste, so that it can go in a flank with one of the Forsaken, so that I've got inspiring and more threat on a flank.
What I think is the best build for me and my playstyle is what I did the List Builder Studio on. So I won't bore you again with that one. What I thought would be an interesting list, though, is 2 regiments of Order of the Thorn, both with Vial of Sacred Water, a Order of the Redemption, there you go, Marcelo, with Blessing of the Gods, 2 Forsaken Hordes with Vial and Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding on one of them, 3 pegs, because you can't have 4, the Avatar of the Green Lady, and the formation with a Devoted that has the Steed, Loot, and Bane Chant. And this list, as it is, has 15 spare points to maybe put a command dice on someone or to buy another few items on some things if you feel it. This is 13 points, so it's a little bit on the low drop side, but the key there is like the Bane chant is really great with the Order of the Thorn if they're somewhere around the Devoted as well. So it's still got a fair bit of punch. You can kind of treat them as a hammer, and then, with the Water Elementals and the Forsaken Hordes and the Redemption, you've got quite a bit of hammers, but also quite a bit of staying power.
That could be used as the hammer and envoy list.
Yep.
Because you have some good envoys in that list.
Well, we're at a point now, guys. Going to wrap this up by sharing why people should play this army.
Yeah, sure. I think if you want your opponent to constantly think that they're about to kill some units and then suddenly nothing's going to die because everything is healed back, that's a great reason to play this army. It's very disheartening for your opponent to deal lots of damage to all these things and then suddenly all the damage goes away, which is a very real thing that happens with this list. So yeah, if you like to be fast, punch people in the face, and then get rid of all the damage that they deal to you, this is the army for you.
I think that it's an army that teaches you self-control. The fact that we were talking to the point of you have speed, but know when to use it and when not to use it. I think that's one of the highest level of skills that you can learn in Kings of War is to learn that patience of when to go in, but to still have the exciting thrill of being to have that speed and that punchiness when you actually want to go in and do it, to be able to time things right.
Luke, you've got a podcast. Let's tell everybody about it because more people will need to listen to Control Fire.
No worries. Thank you. So I am a co-host along with Sam and Mike on Controlled Fire. We are an exclusively firefight podcast, and you can find us at controlledfire.show.
I love your podcast, Luke.
Oh, thank you.
Like, I play a lot of firefight. I played it at Deptecon and I played here, and I'm building up that community. And I get very excited when I see a new Controlled Fire episode come up. So thank you for doing it.
Very kind of you. Thank you. Yeah, we tried to we do one a month. We don't like to overload you. And we do stick to very tight timeframes, which is an hour per normal episode and 2 hours per army review.
And they're all full of really good substance. Like, they're not just, talking for the sake of talking. They actually have very meaty substance if you really want to know how to play and learn the game.
And more content without Tyler Schultz is always good, right? Well, guys, this has been a great episode. I really appreciate having you guys on. It's obvious you guys love this army, play it a lot. You were able to quickly express very specifically answers to all my questions. You never really think about it. Comes right off the tongue. So that means you've thought a lot about this, and I think that comes through in the podcast. So, there's something to be said when the experience that you've got comes to play here. I doubt there's many things you haven't experienced playing against with this army. Again, thanks for coming on and sharing your love, technique, tips, tricks, all the other things with Order of the Green Lady. And, fingers crossed, this is an army that survives in the 4th edition. Going back to the original question, my money is this is an army that survives.
Thank you for having us. And Luke, I think you convinced me to go back and try the water elemental formation.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for having us. Thanks, Marcelo. It's been awesome to go through this with you. It's been really good.
And to you all, keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.